Anyway, that's just.
Yeah, they wanted us to
Side.
Oh yeah, these guys are really.
I know, probably half of them.
Transportation Advisory Committee was asked for something.
Do they have any lyrics?
People are still finding it. That hasn't been acknowledged.
You're up.
Feels like it's been a while since we've sort of.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? Seems like a long time.
Last week I was like, no meetings? Do I hook up the Wi-Fi here? Yeah, well, we'll get me pacing. I got a while ago, so.
Yes, I missed it. I'm trying to see what it is. I saw it canceled.
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't know about it?
Well,
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna ask her, and I got to say, no, oh, good. Because I wasn't there, Richard. Oh, good. Here. Five, yeah, say five. I have to, let me check. Is she on? Usually Marie lets me know. Yeah, no, she's really good at letting me know. I'll text her about it. Have to go grab the house.
really can't do it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call the meeting to order, the regular council meeting. Thank you all for coming. We're just starting a little bit late. We were waiting for Councilor Nicholson there. We're just going to carry on without her for a little while. Things shape up. Well, the first on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Late items?
We have a few here. Item 3.3, the
public hearing minutes from April 8th were attached incorrectly, so they are provided on table. Item 3.4, there is a revised recommendation regarding the Bowen Youth at Risk Fund.
All right, thank you.
Item 3.9 is a letter from the public regarding the road capital upgrade.
Okay.
3.10, which is an email from the Bylaw Services Supervisor just indicating that the re-canvas area for the building exemption permit was successful. And item 9.1, a letter regarding the Mayor's Standing Committee recommendations.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the council approved the agenda and late item agendas for the April 23rd, 2019 regular council meeting. Sue Ellen, David, thank you. And all in favor? Thank you. And public comments. Do we have anybody on the
We
list?
have two. We have Robin Benson regarding Birch.
Great. Hi, Robin.
Good evening, everybody. You know who I am. I thought that I would introduce, we also have three of our board members here. We have David McCollum, Jack Liddell, and Aaron Davidson. They're here as well for support. First thing I wanted to do is let you know about the survey that we're conducting, which hopefully you've all seen in the newspaper. You will get a card in the mail tomorrow, so if you haven't yet, please do complete it yourselves, your family members and friends, and if there's any way you can disseminate that information through your networks, that would be most appreciated. I'll give you a quick update. So far we have 218 responses, which I'm quite happy with. So we're hoping for another push this week with the mail out. And interesting, if you have done it, the first two questions are in regards to housing on community lands, and the results so far are very positive. I probably won't share that because I don't want to bias anybody with their answers, but the results are really positive.
Thank you.
And I certainly will be sharing the results of that publicly when it's finished up in about, I think we've got another 10 days or so to go. So I wanted to follow up with a couple of things. The letter, and I'm not going to read the letter because it's in the minutes or in the agenda and you all have that. I did want to clarify a couple of points. I wanted to make it really clear, we got a little bit of feedback that certainly what we said in the letter was not at all meant to be a personal critique or criticism of any of the members of the Mayor's Standing Committee. Quite the opposite. I have a lot of respect for what they're doing and their expertise and the volunteer time that they're committing to that committee. So absolutely that is not what was meant by the letter. It was very much meant to be a constructive criticism that we feel that they were tasked with a very narrow lens, and we felt that our project and the allocation of land was being looked at through a very narrow lens. So we'd really like to widen that lens up, and that's where we were coming from. So I'd like to make 2 points and then just reiterate how we'd like to move forward. So one, I wanted to say, because I'm not sure I've made this clear before, how I see my role in this. I really see myself as a facilitator. So I'm working with Birch, but I'm here to pull together the board members, the political entities, the land, the consultants, the funding, the applications, all of those things, and I see that as my role, what facilitator, project manager, whatever you want to call it. So that's what I'm doing. So I feel like sometimes there's a bit of language of us versus them, and that's not how I see it. It's very much, I'm just, juggling all the balls and trying to pull everybody together to try and get this thing going. So that's where I'm coming from. This certainly, as I'm sure you know, it's not for personal gain. I likely will never live in this housing, although who knows. I'm guessing probably most of you won't, but who knows. But I'm pretty darn sure every single one of us knows somebody that might and can certainly benefit from this housing. The second one is I want to reiterate the value of our community lands. So when I hear comments such as giving land away, I really wanted to be clear that we're not asking you to give us land. We're here to ask you to be our partners and to work together to create the housing that I think we all agree that Bowen needs. So that's where, again, where we're coming from. It's not about giving and taking. And though you may not be getting direct revenue from this land that you're, hopefully not thinking of giving away to us, but working with us to develop for community benefit. Though you're not getting direct revenue from it, you're absolutely getting community benefit from it. You'll be helping people on Bowen with their housing. And it's truly, we're starting to use the word emergency. It's getting to the point where it's a housing emergency on Bowen. We're ready to move forward. We're really excited. We've been invited by the Mayor's Standing Committee to attend your meeting next Monday. So we accept that invitation. We'd really like to move forward. I think the word clean slate has been thrown around, so let's go back to the drawing table. We would like to ask, we respectfully request that meeting be open and to the public. And we'd also like to respectfully request as many council members as possible attend. I'm not sure about schedules and conflicting schedules, but where we're coming from is time is of the essence. We don't have a deadline yet, but as time ticks along, we're getting further and further behind and away from the goal that we could apply for this funding we anticipate for next year. So the hope being that if most, if not all, councillors can be at this meeting, we can all be at the table and discuss it together. If we can get ideally consensus, and if not compromise on where the best place for this project is, and if we can have most of council there to agree on that, we feel really confident moving forward.
I just have to give a point of clarification,
Yes.
Robin. It is not a council meeting, it's a committee meeting. So
Yes.
council members who are not part of the committee will not be sitting at the table making
Okay.
that decision.
Okay, and they're not allowed to be invited.
Oh, of course, they're
Yeah.
more than welcome to attend.
Okay.
They're just not decision makers at that meeting.
Yes.
Committee meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so the alternative being, and again, I'll leave it up to you guys to discuss the best way to move forward. If it made more sense to have a committee of the whole meeting, if that was more conducive to it. But I guess what we're saying is we'd really like decision makers to be in the room so that we don't get into, you know, a committee and us making a decision, then going to council and then getting refused and then going back to a committee and then, you know, and as weeks and weeks go by. So it would be really great, that's our request, so that we can move things forward in an efficient and timely manner if we could have them there. So I'll leave it up to you to decide how that best happens. Let me look at my notes here. So yeah, the goal being at the end of that meeting, we would really be happy if there was a clear outcome that hopefully would have the support of most of council, that we could move forward in a timely fashion. And so we'd also like to, we're setting a goal at the end of June, so June 30th, to apply for our next round of funding. So that would be one of our next requests, is if we could again, set a mutual goal between us, agreed upon goal to have the agreement to lease, if not officially done, well on its way, but it would ideally be done by then, and preferably, and again, I don't know all of the steps this requires, but subdivision, agreement on the site and subdivision underway. I know it won't be complete, but Daniel, gasp. At least underway and happening, and that we can have some certainty, so that when we're applying, this is the CMHC seed funding application, that starts the ball rolling on, you know, hiring the designers and the engineers and for site, you know, actual site stuff. So we need that certainty. I think that's the end of my notes. So thank you very much, and we're really looking forward to next week's meeting and moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for the clarification, and Maureen, go ahead.
Yeah, two questions. The CMHC seed funding application, if that funding application were to be successful,
Yes.
how much would you receive?
I believe the amount is somewhere between 50,000 and 200,000. Some of that is a grant, and I believe that some of it is basically a no interest loan that you borrow and then gets paid out once the construction starts. So I'd have to confirm those numbers with the consultant, but we'd probably be going at the higher end of that, because this will start to pay for the architect's work, the engineer's work. I'm not sure if we can get some early site clearing and, you know, all of those things. It's all the pre-development. The goal being at the end of that cycle that we pretty much have, much like you are with the community center right now, you have building permit drawings ready and you're ready to apply for the big funding so that you're shovel ready essentially.
And you're setting a goal of June 2019. Is that because there is an established deadline for the
No, it
program?
is a rolling intake.
It's a rolling
Yeah,
intake.
so there's no hard and fast deadline, but we all work well to goals and deadlines. I certainly know I do. So that's something that we're setting, and again, it would be a mutually agreed upon, so as we move forward over, I'm sure, the coming weeks, we can look at that together and figure out what the steps are to get to those. And we'd just really like to get a timeline going, especially because we also have funding right now for the feasibility stage with our consultants, and we want to make use of that and move through those steps. So we just really want to start getting a timeline established.
Okay. And then
Train
my-
is leaving the station, sorry.
And then my last question is just for the rest of council. So Councillor Hawking and the mayor and myself will be at the mayor's standing committee meeting because we're members of the standing committee.
Yeah.
So my question is the rest of council, who else will be able to be there on Monday evening,
It's Monday,
this coming
this
Monday?
coming Monday. What time? I have a
7.
advisory, well, maybe, I have an advisory design panel right before that.
I'll do my best to be there, so.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, Robert, and I am really sorry, it was only because I just have a prior commitment, and this is the first I've heard of that date. Otherwise, I really would have been there, but I just cannot.
Works for you, Allison? Okay, so you'll have more than 3.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud.
Andrew Stone regarding lot 3.
Mayor, council, and staff, haven't seen some of you in a while. I'm just going to stand here so I don't have my back to the audience and the camera. I came here initially to support the Birch initiative, but as I thought about it, I realized that I don't have a full current understanding of what's going on Lot 3, because I know a lot of decisions have been made recently. But just, you know, having my ear to the ground in the community, I'm hearing a lot of noise about what's going on with Lot 3, and I just want to mention a couple of things that I think might help to get the word out so people know what's going on in the community. Can I ask a question? Right now, is all of the community land decision-making, the meetings that are going on, say, since the beginning of this council term, is that all on a launch page on the website right now?
I don't know.
The webpage?
It should be reported.
Like in terms of, like I know sometimes, and Kathy, the communications has really amped up since I was on council, so
Well,
congratulations.
all the resolutions that have come out of the Mayor Standing Committee have been released to the public and are part of this agenda. So
Sure.
the committee is quite new.
Okay,
It's only been around, this version of the committee has been around for 6 weeks.
okay. Anyway, I'm just thinking about one place on the website where.
We do have a community lands page.
Yes, well, that's actually what I'm talking about. So it is a lot,
If I could just add, there haven't been, as far as I'm aware, any decisions beyond what is currently on the Community Lands website.
Okay.
So everything is in motion.
okay. Well, like I said, I'm hearing a lot of noise, so I'm just here to let the council know that that's going on, and rather than getting into this morass like we have with some past problems that we've had on the island, that I'm just, you know, just over the past 6 weeks, I've heard a lot of stuff, and some of it's contradictory, and other stuff is just, you know, some of it's misdirected anger too. But so anyway, but backing up from that, I just want to mention that one thing personally that I've made very large note of is the tax situation on Bowen. In the past 2 years, council has passed 2 successive years where the taxation is on track now to double in 5 to 7 years, if it continues in its current pace, with an 8% increase the year before and then 6 something this year. You know, you have 7% tax increases year over year, you're doubling in 7 years, right, with compounding. So, you know, this past election, almost everybody around this table ran on the idea of affordability, and the effect that has in taxation is a major part of that. So, you know, the island just got hit with, you know, another 6 point whatever his increase, and you know, it's I'm hoping that we're going to be pulling back to the typical 2 to 2.75 kind of increase, which is, you know, like you guys know, when you go to UBCM and counselor school, everyone's asking, what's your tax increase? And you say more than 3, oh, like, really? So, you know, I think we have to be careful about that, and it really speaks to the affordability issue, and I think we should be really mindful of that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda, which is fairly large. If anybody has anything they'd like to pull off that, so
I'd like to pull 3.17. On page 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goes up
No,
to
yeah. Oh, yeah.
3.23.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything about 3.2.
No, okay. Anybody else, Maureen?
3.4.
Okay. Allison?
No.
Okay. So I'll put those both in section 11. Anything else? All right, thank you. So, council approved the items as outlined in the April 23rd, 2019 consent agenda as amended. All of it. Thank you, David. Okay. And all in favor? Thank you. All right. So delegations. You on a beat here, you coming? Just move your chair if you want, yeah. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you all. So Fiona and I are going to share this presentation. My purpose of coming here this evening, it's kind of seems a little close to the House Sound Community Forum, which many of you are very familiar with, but I just wanted to bring to the attention of Council that the last time that Bowen Island hosted the House Sound Community Forum was in May 2015, and it was a really great event at Kate's Chapel. As many of you might are aware, that the members of the House Sound Community Forum, which are the local governments and 3 regional districts and the Squamish First Nation, signed on to the Principles for Cooperation, which were drafted up in early 2000s. It's been well supported over the years. The forums take place twice a year. We have up to 70 people that participate. It is a forum for local governments to sit around a table much like this, to share information, to learn together, and it's a great networking. With a focus, of course, on the shared principles of and shared values of this place that we value so much. Number of consensus sort of actions have come forward over the years based on consensus around the table. A number of those will be reported on at this next forum taking place on Friday on Gambier Island. The way that the forums work is each community member, Allison actually, or Councillor Moore, sorry, was at the table when the Principles for Cooperation are first drafted up. So it's great that Bowen has this history and continuity with the forum. As I was saying, the communities take turns hosting. The cost is for Bowen Island last time was around $1,400, I believe. So they're very, I work as a volunteer. The House Sound Biosphere Region Initiative, which I'll speak about next, that's the banner I work under now. And so we do try to remove the barriers for getting people together. So it's very reasonable to host. So my point is, if Bowen would like to host again within this next 4 years, there's lots of room available for you to be able to do that, and I would certainly be happy to work with you. The second item is in November 2016, Bowen Council provided support or resolved to give support to the initiative for House Sound to be designated as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. We're now 3 years, almost 3 years into this project. We are a registered society. I've attended 3 UNESCO events. We are invited, feeling pretty welcomed into the UNESCO family of biosphere reserves. We would, if successful, we would be the 19th biosphere reserve in Canada. The other 2 are Clayoquot Sound Biosphere Reserve on Itsinga, Pacific Rim National Park, and Mount Arrowsmith, which is Nanaimo, it's run out of the Vancouver Island University. Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Reserve is Parksville, Holcomb, French Creek, that area there. So we would be the third British Columbia Biosphere Reserve, and we would join the family of the others in Canada, and a network of close to 700 worldwide. I did just come back from the European Biosphere Reserve Network meeting in Dublin, and it was a wonderful opportunity to hear from other countries and biosphere reserves as to what the benefits are for local communities, for the region. I think more than ever, biosphere reserves are looked at as, they're definitely aspirational. They don't have any legal, they don't require any legal changes to land use. They don't interfere with rights and title. But they are model areas for biodiversity conservation, for sustainable development, and for reconciliation. There's a very large focus on working with Indigenous people in the region. So as we move forward with our nomination document, we will look for the council today to either provide further support for the nomination, or the resolution itself may stand. But I just want to make sure that new council is aware that there has been support shown. So I'm happy to answer any questions at any time, but I'm going to hand the rest of the time over to Fiona. Oh yeah, I have those right. Oh yes, there was the, thank you. That was the request. The budget is up to 3,000, but we rarely spend that. And some of the initiatives for Biosphere Reserve, we are hoping to complete our nomination and submit that in 2019. And some of the other initiatives that, as examples, would be that we would look to support Indigenous language. We had a Sustainable Development Goals Forum last September, so we'll be following through on that. And the other one I don't have any more information on at the moment, but that's an example.
Right, so hello everybody, my name is Fiona Beattie and I'm the project director for an initiative that the Bowen Island municipality has passed support toward. So I'm here today to give you a little bit of an update on that project and to inform any new councillors on what our intent is. The name of the project is the How Sound at Cutsum Marine Reference Guide, and our objective with this initiative is to provide resources and support to community members and decision makers in the Sound so that we can build regional capacity to protect and restore our marine environment, and to ensure that as our region experiences continual growth and development, that we conduct that in tandem with our marine ecological values. So the project is very much oriented towards providing resources, and one of those resources is an online interactive map that can help to visualize many of the values that we hold and associate with our marine environment. Those include ecological values such as species distributions, but they may also highlight important industrial areas, important tourism and recreation areas, important cultural areas. And using this tool, we can help to identify where those layers might overlap and to build conversations around building consensus about use of space, and also understanding where we want our region to go into the future. So it's an effective planning tool in that sense. To accompany the map, we will construct a series of narrative resources. So the reference guide has a governance structure of the Ocean Watch Task Force in the Squamish Nation for the leadership partners for the initiative. We also have a steering committee that has representatives from local government staff, First Nations and federal government staff, and then different marine sectors such as industry and tourism and conservation, so that we can kind of have that roundtable discussion about our region. And they are the ones who will sort of go through many of the conversations about, given this area and what we know about it, what would be the recommendations for this. So some of these resources will be embedded within the map. And then, of course, through the process of creating these tools, our hope is to build relationships in the Sound so that we can increase our understanding of this region as a holistic entity, rather than something that is divided up into the 9 different local governments and the 3 different overlapping First Nations territories and the provincial and the federal. We really want to kind of engage all of the groups that are acting in this region so that we can communicate effectively and make informed decisions with the intent of protecting our ecological values. As I'm sure you're aware, the Sound has been experiencing a recovery of some sorts over the last few years, which has really catalyzed a lot of excitement and engagement in our region in connection to the marine environment. So it's a great opportunity now to build on that momentum and go forward. Continue along that positive trajectory, because for a lot of the oceans right now, we're not seeing that positive growth, but in Howe Sound we are. So we're going to be building off a database that we've been building over the last 1.5 years through a separate project called the Howe Sound Marine Conservation Assessment. And that initiative is very much oriented towards a conservation angle, whereas the reference guide is much more multi-stakeholder and a little bit more oriented toward decision makers and planners. But we're thankful to have this database that has many of the ecological layers within it already, so you can feel free to explore that at howsoundconservation.ca. Here we can see the salmon bearing streams highlighted in the Sound, and you can also, it's hard to see on that projection, but there's eelgrass highlighted in pink, so in the zoomed in image, that's the Paisleys and around Tunstall Bay and Bowen Bay, and you can see that there's quite a lot of eelgrass in that region, but when we zoom out to the whole Sound, there's not that much of it in the rest of the Sound. So what this tool can help to do is highlight those sort of uneven distribution of certain ecosystem values so that we can make decisions that are taking that into account, the fact that it's in one region but may not be in another area, and so how we can restore and build to protect those systems. The project itself is very much building off of many years of work by a number of different initiatives and governments. So this diagram helps to sort of pay homage to some of those groups that are feeding into forming this database and also highlight the initiatives that we're hoping to support with it. So those include First Nations initiatives such as the Squamish Nation Marine Use Plan, but also federal initiatives, provincial and regional community initiatives, also transboundary. So, because with the oceans, you know, there's no line that you can draw in the ocean that stops things from flowing across borders. And so we want to make sure that that's very much in mind when we're building this and that we're communicating with those different groups. So with that, I'd like to thank all of the groups who are involved in this. Really thank you all for passing your support towards this project. We're looking forward to giving you updates and answering any questions you have, and hopefully to talking with the planning staff on ways that we can make sure that this tool is very well used by Bowen's municipality and by Bowen's community.
That is a fabulous tool. It was the Ocean Watch thing we did up at the school there, where you had all that.
That was the conservation.
All the layering
yeah.
and stuff like that is absolutely fantastic. It's really, really handy. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Oh, David, you want to start?
This is really great, thank you very much. You said we, who's we? So
Good
who's
question.
we with?
Yeah, so the project is operating through Tides Canada, which is a national charity, and it's operating on their shared platform. So that's a platform that offers administrative and financial support to projects that are more project-based rather than, we're not forming our own NGO to advance this because it's such a collaborative and multi-stakeholder project. We're going through Tides Canada. So, yeah, it's really owned and created by the community rather than one organization. The Tides is the overhead.
Well, thank you very much.
Maureen?
There is an ask in the presentation
Yeah.
to post the forum and to cover the costs up to $3,000. Is it appropriate to put forward a recommendation,
I think it
resolution at
certainly
this
would be,
point?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't, looking at Raj's face, I don't think it's something that we have available in our 2020 budget, but maybe we could aim to hold it in 2021.
It's
Okay.
for sometime in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
4 years, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be really nice to hold it if our new community center was.
That would be lovely.
Yeah.
So what if the
Would be
recommendation
nice.
were to support hosting the House Sound Community Forum on Bowen Island in the current term of 20, whatever it is, 18 to 2022.
Or maybe we can
Yeah.
get an
As a
even firmer
strategic,
commitment of 2021.
initiative.
2020, in 2021 or 2022. So I move that.
I second that.
Did you want to put the word as a strategic initiative or strategic priority, and that way it's in your strategic
That sounds good.
priority?
Folks got that?
As amended.
I just want to ask about the UNESCO. I'm familiar with the UNESCO World Heritage Sites in many countries, and here you've got the UNESCO Biosphere. Am I two different types?
Two different, yes. UNESCO also has geoparks. So World Heritage Sites tend to be really internationally significant, already protected heritage, historical sites.
Right.
Geoparks tend to be geologically important. Tumbler Ridge, for instance. So biosphere reserves are unique, and most people have never heard of them. But you might realize how many you've been in if you travel and like to go visit.
No, thank you. I think we did have a presentation. Did we not have a presentation in the last term? I remember.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
that's what I-
Yeah.
Just before we go on here, we do have a resolution on the table. Is there any further comments on that? Let's just have a vote on that. All in favor, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. We'll get that. Okay, excellent.
I just want to also add, when you say we, it's also Bowen Island Municipality. We've chipped in towards
That's very good
the
to
House
see
Sound
that.
Guide. Yeah, so a small number based on our population over 3 years. So we're in the middle of that somewhere now, and I represent Bowen on the Ocean Watch committee. So if anybody wants to know more about it, let me know. I don't always report, and very interesting work.
And we have a staff member assigned to the Ocean Watch Task Force as well. Unfortunately, she's away for a year, but she will be back in October.
And how is for the biosphere, the UNESCO biosphere, how often is it kind of a rolling intake, so we just don't have?
The applications first have to be recommended by the Canadian Commission Committee.
Yeah.
And they would have to go to UNESCO Paris by September. I was being very optimistic. I'm not feeling like it would be, we are gonna make it this year, but we do hope to get the Canadian Commission a full, complete application this year. And so that would be the following year. And then typically, if it's successful in Paris, if they don't have any red flags or send it back, then it would possibly, then they announce them in June of each year. So, 2020 or 2021, 21 probably.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good. That's when we're gonna have our meeting.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. Wonderful. All right. Ian Podmore in place of David Podmore. Thank you very much. Yeah. Daniel, have you got some information there, Mark?
It's over here.
Sorry. So we do the, there we go.
A bit of that, Michael.
I know.
Finally found it, Mitch.
So, thank you, Mayor and Council. So I just have a few slides here that are just images from the report to give some background context of we're going to Echo Float, so the Eel Cliff Community Association folks. So the area we're talking about is the area below Eel Cliff Road itself, off of Cleator Road. So there's a series of floats that come in here, and here's a closer look at them. So these floats are owned by the municipality and on a 10-year from the province, that a lease that's held by the municipality. So they were a part of the Eagle Cliff improvement water improvement district, that when the municipality was formed, the letters patent dissolved the district and all of its assets were assumed by the municipality. So the municipality assumed ownership at that point. So this is what the floats look like as of last summer when staff did a site visit. And just put some context to the report, but the floats have been roughly similar floats in a similar location, have been there since this photo was from the 40s to 60s with the museum archives. So they've been there since before essentially the road access was there in this part of Bowen Island. So going over some of the history and the context for why it's come there. So they said the municipality assumed ownership at incorporation, but has had very little actual interaction with the floats themselves, and that the community association has been in charge of essentially assumed ownership of them, or maintenance and responsibility for the floats in that time. The Eagle Cliff Association organizes the floats to be moved to a winter storage location and come back. And the Bowen municipality charges a parcel tax to properties within the water district that covers largely the cost of that towing twice a year, so away and back. And the Eagle Cliff Association has historically done maintenance on the floats or replaced them, and have done calls from their memberships for funds to repair the floats. So why this is before you now is that last spring, the Eagle Cliff Community Association contacted the municipality, primarily because members of the association had concerns about their insurance, their liability insurance, and they think that these floats are open to the public, but they're maintained by this community association who repairs them and installs them, and concerns of members that if something were to happen to a member of the public on a float that had been repaired by a volunteer association, that what their liability risk would be. And so that ECHA had requested municipal insurance coverage be extended to their association. So in May of last year, council agreed to provide ECHA an associate membership to municipal insurance for a period of 1 year, while we sort of looked into this more fully. And in part, as staff, we were looking into what would be the process if we wanted to pursue this route of transferring complete ownership of the tenure of the floats to ECHA to manage and to own on an ongoing basis, with the provision that they remain open to the public. So Kathy and I have been meeting and working with the association for a number of months now. But the main hurdle that the association has found is finding liability insurance to cover them as an association should they take over ownership of the floats. And there's a letter from David Podmore in your application that goes into that in some more detail. So in terms of, we identified a number of alternatives. So the one that we recommended is to enter into a long-term servicing agreement with ECHA. So something that would spell out more formally to say, okay, these are owned by the municipality, but the association is willing to continue maintaining and repair at their cost of the floats. And we would be providing membership to our insurance agency. The floats would be open to the public, and as part of that, to set that up, would be having the floats formally inspected to make sure that they're appraised and that they're safe in their current standards, or what standards would have to be implemented as part of the servicing agreement to say they need to remain safe to a certain standard. Like I said, we had explored an option of transferring ownership of the floats and assigning the tenure to ECHA as well, but we haven't found that to be viable. And then the third option we floated that ECHA does not support would be replacing the floats with the plastics from floats. So currently at Bowen Bay and Tunstall Bay, the municipality installs a swim float in the summer. And it's a small plastic float that can be hauled out and taken to our public works yard in the winter. But I do note here that we haven't assessed the feasibility of that. So Bowen Bay and Tunstall Bay are relatively more sheltered, shallower, as opposed to this location, which is quite exposed. Yeah, and so that's just the recommendation that's in the report.
Sure, yeah, maybe I can add, first off, I apologize that my father wasn't able here to step in. I think you all have the letter. From an actual feasibility standpoint, really it's a matter of insurance that is driving the decisions and the need here today. But in the broader context, I think it's important for all councillors and the mayor to understand that these are more than just floats that we're talking about. I know on pictures and everything, they look like floats up and down the coast, which they are. But Eagle Cliff in its essence is a bunch of cliff dwellers with a road in the middle with very little amenity where we can all as neighbors engage. The comings and goings, especially in the summertime and on the weekends, but really throughout the year, is not just on the road, but through trails that run through all of our various properties, and we engage with our neighbors more or less on the ebb and flow to the floats. In and above that, year over year, we're seeing a dramatic increase in the public's use of the beach. When I was a kid, there was very few people that weren't from the neighborhood down there. Now it's probably close to 50-50 on weekends. The floats themselves, they're used not just for sunbathing and swimming. Any given day, you'll have the vast majority of the community there throughout the course of the day, and you'll have public coming and going by kayak, by boat, by coming up and down the trail. There's a new public access that was put in a number of years ago that is used. The road is really an old skid trail from when the community was built, and it's pretty rough and intimidating. So with the new stairs and some of the pathways, that seems to be conducive to getting more and more members down there. So they are very important to us as far as the community is concerned, and I just want to make sure you have that context. Happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions as well?
I have a question about boats moored there. Times that I've been down there, I've seen boats tied up there.
Yep.
I don't know, are they there all the time, or are they, in the summer, or are they coming and going?
So we have to, the floats are owned by the municipality. We have to keep them public. We haven't gone the distance of posting formal rules. But what we do ask is, especially, as you know, tides are quite significant in this neck of the woods. Certain times in the big tides, really it's just the last float that's actually in the water and at a depth that a boat can come and go from. So we do ask that on the end float, it's just really used for loading and unloading. And then the other floats, if it's high tide, we don't mind if somebody, is popping in to visit somebody that lives in the community and wants to tie up for an hour or two. It's pretty organic as far as the rules are concerned, but we don't want, they're not built for long-term storage.
Okay, I was just wondering how much of the use is swimming?
A lot. That's the other reason we don't want a lot of boats on the float. Between my kids and my nieces and nephews, there's probably a kid in the water at all times during the summer. And that probably starts as soon as we bring the floats in, despite whatever the water temperature is. But yeah, no, there's a lot of swimming, there's a lot of kayaking, there's a lot of windsurfing, paddle boarding, you name it. It triggers a lot of that activity. The other aspects of it are all of that water equipment is all stored in some area on the float predominantly. It would fill half the beach, and as you know, our high tide, the beach is pretty jammed up by logs and other things, and with how steep the bank is, there's no place to put dinghies and kayaks and things up on the side of the road.
Thank you.
Dave?
No, I'm happy to move the motion. I'm comfortable with the staff analysis and happy to do that.
Yeah, I guess the insurance is the key there on this whole thing, so it'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different matter if there's a private sign on it, but I don't think that's in anybody's interest. And
no, I don't.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Nice if it wasn't.
Certainly in my conversations with David Podmore, if our insurance providers come back with some suggested changes that needs to be done, he's indicated that ECHA is more than happy to work with our insurer to make sure it's brought up to speed.
Yeah, and then maybe add to that, we are doing more improvements from a safety standpoint even this year. Assuming we can keep going.
Perfect, Maureen.
Just a thank you to your dad for his letter. It was very comprehensive and pretty much answered all the questions that I had, and all the best to you.
Thank you.
I echo that.
Yes. Here. Okay, somebody want to read the resolution?
I think it's been moved.
Oh, it has? Yeah. Okay, well, that's a question. All in favor? Perfect.
Thank you.
The bylaws. Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you have before you is the tax rate bylaw for 2019, which establishes the mill rates so that we can collect for the municipal taxes, we can collect the property tax levy that was approved in the 5-year financial plan for 2019. And essentially the other two columns in the Schedule A of the bylaw are rates for GBRD and Islands Trust. Basically those two taxing authorities levy a dollar amount, so we have to convert that dollar amount into a tax rate to collect those taxes and collect those taxes on behalf of the GBRD and Islands Trust and forward them to them. Don't have a lot more to expand on that, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, so
This is not a major challenge. I'm just curious as to why major industry is on the list when I don't think we've got any, and why its municipal tax rate is 0. Is that just the way it's,
We don't have any, so
okay, it's just there?
it's
Okay.
just there. Yeah, I could have removed it altogether because we don't have that class on the island.
So following up on that question, why then are there numbers under the GBRD and Allen's trust columns?
I probably applied the same rate as lighting. We do have a ratio for taxes for all of those, so I've applied that ratio. So if we did have major industry, we would be taxing at that rate for them. And so if we did have major industry, I should have 8.763502 in the municipal tax rate as well, but we do not have any, so it wouldn't make a difference at the end of the day.
So that's what it would be if we had.
If we had any.
Thank you.
Rob, you do something? All right.
Well, maybe just for the benefit of the public, can you remember off the top of your head how much Metro has requisitioned from us?
I kind of, as I sat here, I knew you were going to ask me. I don't, but I can, for the benefit of all councillors, I will forward that information to all of council by email tomorrow.
Well, it wasn't for me, I've got it because I did have it at home, but I thought the public might be interested in comparing them.
Will you share if you know that?
Oh, I can't remember, I have,
200.
It's about 100.
100,000?
It's
around
close to
100,000.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Versus 300 and some odd thousand for the Allen's trust.
Yes, so.
I just have a question, and that is about the business tax rate. I'm noticing, well, it's the same as residential. And is that the same for our neighboring communities, or do you have any information about that?
Maybe I can answer that one because of history.
Sure.
I think when we first incorporated, we had, the business community came to us. We've got about, over 98% residential. So the business taxes are very small portion of the tax, and they came to us as small businesses struggling and really get absolutely no services from the municipality. They had to dispose of their own garbage in the commercial and et cetera, and are responsible for shoveling the sidewalk in front of their place and everything. And so in order to help them stay afloat, we agreed, we felt it was the right thing to do to match that this residential tax rate match the business tax rate.
To answer the second part of your question, Sue Ellen, other municipalities, the business tax rates are 2 to 4 times higher than the residential.
I think it depends if you look at communities who are as highly residential as we are, then you will find the mill rates usually pretty flat.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing, I'm just asking, because that's
It's an
not my
interesting question,
department, yes.
Could I also point out, it's not just the size, but also the seasonality. Our businesses here have a season, and that they have an on-season and an off-season, and largely our type of rural communities with that lengthy off-season created this environment where, as such a small percentage, they were treated in the same way, and I think I basically would support that.
Thank you, that's fine.
All right, anybody, any further discussion? The resolution is by law recommendation.
Would you like me to read it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'll move that bylaw number 486, 2019, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Annual Tax Rate Bylaw number 486, 2019, be read a first, second, and third time.
Second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that is unanimous. It's passed.
One more question just occurred to me.
Oh,
Have we done the parcel tax
Now that, I'm going to bring that forward at the next
and
council
the
meeting.
water systems?
Pardon?
By name, the water systems rates changing?
None of the water rates are changing, just the garbage parcel tax.
all right, 6.2, Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development. Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I don't have an application for this one, but this is bylaw number 461. So this is a rezoning application for 431 Bowen Island Trunk Roads, the Union Steamship Marina. And this is for consideration of third reading. So we went to a public hearing as council, I'm sure remembers, April 8th, we had the public hearing. And we had 6 written comments in support of the application in advance of the hearing, and then 2 members of the public spoke at the hearing, one in support and one with concerns, specifically related to the septic system and the use of the units. So the report that's in your agenda has a summary of all the comments we've received to date on this application. So from the public as well as from our referrals to the Islands Trust, to the APC, and to the Central Sewer Local Management Committee. And then tied with this staff recommendation is to give third reading to the land use bylaw amendment bylaw, but also to give 2 more readings, second and third reading, to the housing agreement that would govern the use essentially of the units, and as well as authorize staff to register the sewer covenant on the title of the land, and that would be controlling, mandating essentially inspections of the onboard sewer systems for the floating buildings. And so following that, staff would then return with bylaw 461 for adoption, following, I guess, bylaw 480 for adoption, so the housing agreement to be adopted in advance of the land use bylaw amendment. So I guess I don't have the presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Anybody have any questions?
I have one. I'm on page 2 of this report, which I think is page 158,
Okay.
and I'm looking at F. So I'm in the sewage disposal part, and I'm looking at the second part of F, which says, and the float home use only permitted as an accessory use to a marina, subject to permanent connection to pump out facilities, or a sewage disposal system approved by Vancouver Coastal Health. Has it been approved, or when would it be approved? Prior to passing
Prior
it
to
or after?
building permit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Maureen?
Can I just confirm what the process is, assuming we give third reading to each of these, and the sewer covenant is registered on title? What's the next step?
Yes, sorry, so I would then bring the housing agreement back for adoption in advance of adopting the land use bylaw.
And in advance of, would they be done at the same meeting?
I would just check timing with that. They could be done at the same meeting, or if we want to wait to adopt it and register bylaw 480.
Okay. So the time frame for bringing this to a close would be a month, 2 months?
No, so I mean, I would hope, by next council meeting at the very least, assuming the recommendation is moved, at the very least, it would be bringing the bylaw 480. And like I said, I'll just seek some clarity in terms of if I can do that in the same meeting, just following adoption of 480, that we could adopt 461.
Okay, so within a month?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
So Danielle, are you still finalizing the housing agreement?
So the housing agreement is in your agenda. So you gave it first reading in advance of the public hearing, and then it's here for consideration of second and third reading of that bylaw. And then to assume that this goes well, my schedule would be to bring it back for adoption at the following council meeting.
Okay.
So do I need to move the motion?
No, but by all means, I'd be happy to second it.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll move that bylaw number 461, 2018, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 461, 2018 be read a third time. The bylaw number 480, 2019, cited as Union Steamship Marina Housing Agreement Authorization Bylaw number 480, 2019 be read a second and third time as amended. And the council authorized staff to register the sewer covenant attached to the report from the manager of planning and development on the title of 431 Bowen Island Trust Road.
Second.
Any further discussion? Three, okay. I'll ask a question. Sorry, go ahead.
I added up the numbers of the 40 buildings, so just to bring to council's attention that there's a neighborhood forming down here, because there's these 16, there's 15 other little boards that are permitted. I don't know if they're all used. There's 3 float homes, and there's the one big structure with the toilets and the showers in it, and the office, so that's 35 dwellings. So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention, that that's what we're voting to add to.
Thank you. I'll ask a question. All in favor? Thank you. It's unanimous. All right, back to Daniel Martin.
Okay, so my next item is traffic and use of streets amendment bylaw number 469, 2018. So a bylaw for the ferry lineup. So this came to council at the March 11th meeting, and at that meeting, council directed staff to amend bylaw number 469 for its discussion at that meeting, and for consideration of second and third reading. So just some summary what bylaw 469 currently has in it is to amend our traffic and use of streets bylaw to add a ferry lineup section and a stopping and parking section, or adding to the stopping and parking section. So what the bylaw 469 does is it says that it requires all vehicles in the ferry lineup to pull up within 24 inches of the next vehicle ahead in line to only enter the ferry lineup for the purpose of waiting to board the next available sailing, and to enter, So what we have done based on that council discussion and based on the public feedback that was received is to amend that ferry lineup section. So it now reads, all ferry traffic must enter the ferry lineup behind the last vehicle in the ferry line or in the first open space closest to the ferry dock. So that's to address the concern of people leaving Gassman. So to clarify that infilling is permitted, but the goal is you can't be far away at the back. It should be at the next space. And then section I, in the case where there are 2 lanes of ferry lineup, so top of the lineup, ferry traffic must line up in the shorter lane where traffic is closest to the ferry dock. So to put in the bylaw that directions that are on our signage at the lineup. So again, says all vehicles must pull up within 0.6 meters of the vehicle next ahead of the ferry lineup or at the start of a cross-hatched area. So I think we amended hatch to say cross-hatched for clarity, and to say that no portion of the vehicle may cover the cross-hatched area. And then again, the bylaw will say all vehicles only enter the ferry lineup for the purpose of waiting to board the next available sailing. So the other thing that the report did, based on that council discussion, is bring a report from Hope in terms of bylaw enforcement. So exploring different avenues of how are we going to, if we adopt this bylaw, what direction is the bylaw department going to take in terms of enforcement? So they outlined 3 different scenarios, with one being status quo. So as is currently the case, bylaw, the bylaw services would deal with ferry lineup issues on a spot basis during regular office hours. The second option there was active enforcement during peak sailings. So this is for a 6-month period, do limited enforcement at peak weekday sailings. So we budgeted the cost of that at approximately $100,000. And they do is that at the end of the 6 months that the bylaw services would be reporting to council to give a sense of how it's gone and to look for further direction. I think with the thinking being that as we change the rules to enforce more actively at the start and possibly that would taper off as people adjust to the bylaw. And then the third option, which would be for full-time adding a permanent staff member to monitor the ferry lineup year-round. And the cost of that approximately $37,000. So the recommendation is to give second and third reading to bylaw number 469 as amended, so those amendments I discussed, and then council authorize staff to pursue enforcement strategy number 2 as outlined in the corporate officer's staff report. Further in your agenda, so that would be the limited enforcement at peak weekday sailings over a 6-month period following adoption of the bylaw.
All right. Maureen?
A couple of comments. The limited enforcement of peak weekday sailings for me is problematic. Many of the issues arise on weekends or on holidays.
So to speak to that, later in the report, we have several long weekends and weekend sailings on long weekends and holidays that will be covered off. We've sent a letter to BC Ferries for cost sharing, which we do annually. So we're asking for roughly $2,500 towards that. So in addition to the weekday sailings, we'll have the flagging on these specified dates in the staff report. So it's kind of like during weekday, we'll have like a BIM staff member, and then on the weekends, we'll have a contracted or a BIM staff person, which we're trying to bring services in-house. So we will have that coverage on the weekends and on the holidays. I think we're hoping that we do get the funding again this year, but we'll probably go ahead with it.
That's great. I missed that. The second point.
Can I have a follow-up on that one?
Sure.
So the flagger, can they hand out warning tickets?
Yeah, so part of our communications piece is, you'll see at the end of the report, like what we did with Mannion Bay, is we get kind of business card sized info cards made that have just like the key provisions of the bylaw, like what the changes are, what the expectations are. And then on the reverse, where you can find the information and the bylaw services contact information. So that's something that we foresee bylaw services staff handing out when monitoring the berry lineup in the initial 6-month period. And then people have it in their car, they can refer to it, if they want more information, they can go to the website or contact Bylaw.
So Allison, yes, they will, because the flaggers will be auxiliary bylaw officers.
Okay. But, yeah, and then we're going to talk about the enforcement policy separately, or?
Council, but I think Maureen was.
Yeah, my second question, forgive me if I missed this, but what is the fining structure for this? Is it included in this report? I didn't see it.
So no, the finding's not included in it. We're hoping that we're trying to take a softer approach, education enforcement over violation enforcement, but I think with everything in bylaw services, we try to educate first, and then repeat offenders, we will do violation notices. And that's also, the RCMP also does violation tickets on our behalf. So people that are parked in the gray lineup that have no intention of boarding the next sailing, if it's on a spot basis, then violation notices will be issued.
And the violation notices will be on a standard penalty schedule?
Yep, so it's $25 if you pay within the first 14 days, and then I think it's 50 and then 75 within,
So there's nothing special in terms of the enforcement of this particular bylaw?
No, it would be our
everything
regular
else?
finding schedule.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I had the same question this morning because I missed that too. I was thinking, are we going to stop doing the weekend? So that'll just continue.
So it's just in addition to.
This is in
weekday.
addition to it. Okay,
Yeah.
great, I got it. And the second thing is just want to say I'm in support of this bylaw. I think it heads towards compliance rather than enforcement. We want to densify the ferry lineup so more people can fit in. And I think it's consistent with BC Ferries. That's good too, to help everybody figure out the way it works. And I like having the tight amount, the distinct and specific amount of space that's allowed between vehicles, because otherwise you can't enforce. If it's about, then anybody can say, well, what is that? So I support the bylaw and I'll be voting in favor.
yeah.
So back to the crosshatched areas. Is it standard in the Motor Vehicle Act? It doesn't say in here anywhere, and I thought it did in the first one, but it's too hard to find it, that you can't park or stop in the crosshatched area. So I mean, is that in the Motor Vehicle Act or is it somewhere else in our traffic use of streets bylaw?
That you can't stop in the crosshatched
Yeah.
area. So the amendment, the proposed amendment would say no portion of the vehicle may cover the crosshatched area.
Well, it said, well, I guess I'm not reading it that way. It says when parking at the start of a crosshatched area, no portion of the vehicle may cover the crosshatched area.
Hmm?
I think it is in the Motor Vehicle Act.
Hmm? That's how I read it.
Yeah, because people don't seem to understand what a crosshatched area is. So are there crosshatched areas in the Lower Mainland? I mean, are we using the same paint and whatever? 'Cause-
Well, perhaps, I think we got to repaint them to start with,
Well, no,
but I think it's
saw
also
five
part of the
cars,
education.
5 cars yesterday, or
Yeah.
Sunday, parked in the crosshatched area. And I was about to go and say something to them, and my kids said, no, you're not. So I didn't, anyhow.
So I know, Allison, like in front of St. Paul's on Boulevard, there's a crosshatched area to all the ambulances to come in, because there's a light there where people stop and it crosshatches to try to block people out, but I don't know what's in the Motor Vehicle Act.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to add, one of the challenges of the crosshatch area is you've got people going down the road on the ferry. Now, that ferry goes, it's way overloaded, right?
Yeah.
So people are following the car in front because they don't know where the ferry is going to suddenly stop. So what we find ourselves with is, yes, I followed the car in front, and guess what? It's put me right on a crosshatch. Ferry sails away, and there's no way I can back up without causing a massive dislocation of bumping all the cars behind me. So that's not going to work. So I can see that's going to need a little bit of, it's not much can happen there. But I wanted to ask, because when you are managing your, on number 2, and you're having to manage your limited resources, are you working off previous experience, just, you know, how it was last year, so that gives you a best estimate of what you're likely to need, tourism numbers? How are you able to gauge the midweek? Is it I mean, it's difficult. Are you just going to say this week last year was a particularly busy week and therefore we need to be prepared, or tourism numbers are up 25% for Vancouver on what it was the same period last year?
I actually have not looked at the stats, but historically there's about 13 weekends that are historically very busy.
Yep.
And they're laid out in the report, so they're usually, you know, the Sunday or Monday after a holiday. And so those are all the ones that we're seeking cost recovery from BC Ferries for. And then anything in addition to that that is gonna be a problem, we can utilize our on-call auxiliary Bylaw services person if there are seeming to be issues. But what we have budgeted for is for the peak sailings, which is the 6:30, 7:30, 8:30,
Yeah.
and then the afternoon sailings, because there's lots of construction going on and off and things like that. So making sure that the ferry lineup is, there's no one in the crosshatch area, so that the end of the ferry lineup is not moving into the road.
David?
Yeah, just to answer my first question, there's been a long correspondence between BIMTAC and staff about the busy weekends and the Ferry Advisory Committee, so that's sort of an ongoing discussion, and it gets changed if it needs to, but it's built on past experience.
Yes, and I was just thinking of the midweek as well. And we do have stats available if you're ever interested on whether there's exceptional demand in the region.
Yeah, I think we'll wrap this up. We have gone around this forever. And we're probably not going to get it perfect right the first time, and I think it would be very important that after the summer season this year, that we have a review of the procedure and see how we made out. There's going to be a lot of factors come in there that we haven't thought about.
I'm happy to move it.
Can I ask that it be severed into 2 motions?
I'd actually like to add a clause. I'd like to propose an amendment
Okay.
first.
Yeah.
So the proposed amendment relates to the reporting back, and it's that, and the council directs staff to report back to council on the effectiveness of enforcement strategy 2 following the first 6 months of its implementation. I know it's in the report, but I think it would have more impact if it actually were in the recommendation.
Yeah, I agree.
So proposed amendment.
Yeah, second.
Second that, that's okay, good.
Actually, never mind about severing. Oh, yes, sever Maureen's part of
Okay. Hope, did you get that?
Did you want to not add it to the end of the corporate office's staff
No,
report?
because I want to vote favor one against the other.
Okay. So.
So you want to sever the bylaw and the staff report, correct?
Yeah, it's Maureen's third clause that she just added. I would like to have it separate from the rest, the other two clauses.
So you want to have 3 separate?
Two.
No, just two. These first two as they're written. And then
Clarification,
the other.
there's just 2 clauses. Maureen, I think, amended the second one. So there's not 3 separate
Oh, okay, well
clauses.
then,
Well, actually,
Or is it a
I
second?
thought it was a that, and the third one.
it was
Oh, it
proposed
was,
as a third.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's move the first one.
I'll move the first
Thank you.
double one.
Yeah.
That bylaw number 469, 2018, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Traffic and Use of Streets, bylaw number 133, 2005, amendment bylaw 469, 2018, be read a second and third time as amended, and that council authorize staff to pursue enforcement strategy number 2, as outlined in the corporate officer's staff report dated April 11, 2019.
All right, second. All right, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Allison.
Oh.
Okay, and one opposed?
Did you want both of those, that's the 2 that you wanted separate?
Well, no, I realized afterwards that the waste of money is in the enforcement strategy, so.
I think we should adopt bylaws and not enforcement.
No, I don't, as I said all along, we can't legislate good behavior and waste of money to truck.
Okay, and Hope, could you read the second one, please?
I've added a little bit in there just for clarification. That council directs staff to report back on the effectiveness of the ferry lineup enforcement strategy following the first 6 months of its implementation. So,
Sounds good.
So moved.
I moved. Second. Any further discussion? Rob?
Quick maybe comment to staff, how would we judge whether it's successful or not, just outside of anecdotal sort of things are better or things are worse? Yeah.
I believe that in the capable hands of our bylaw services officer to take stats and just what are the dealings of the interactions
Okay.
that their encounters.
But if we do have council members who can give us some pointers or some good
Yeah.
ideas, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
This is all new for all of us, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Open suggestions.
All right.
So like,
Any further discussion? Or ask a question, all in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. All right, staff reports. Tyler Reynolds, Bylaw Services Supervisor.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm here tonight to present a report to just provide council with an update regarding 4 vessels currently located in Mannion Bay that are in various states of wreck and non-compliance. And the first vessel is a sunken vessel that is a complete wreck that needs to be raised and removed. The other is a sailboat that is on the rocks. It is damaged beyond repair. It also needs to be removed and demolished. A third vessel is one that has no mast, is not navigatable, and is not currently being used for recreational purposes, which is part of our requirements for Mannion Bay. And the third vessel also doesn't have a mast. Unfortunately, it broke off and sunk in the last winter during one of the windstorms, and is in very poor repair. And the last 2 vessels don't have an owner, or it depends on the day whether the owner agrees that they're theirs or not, depending on whether you're trying to enforce the bylaw. So we'd like to be able to pursue a strategy to be able to remove them, and that is using the abandoned boats program through the federal government. And the first step of that is to, pardon me, approach Transport Canada to receive a Section 20 letter, which essentially gives us the authorization to take possession of that vessel and then apply to the abandoned boats program for federal funding.
Tyler, a couple quick questions. So when we take possession, do we take ownership of the boats, or we just have the right now to apply to get rid of them?
Yeah, taking possession means that we have the right to be able to proceed with obtaining the funding for it. You know, at this moment in time, none of the vessel owners are taking responsibility to deal with them themselves. And so they will remain there if nothing happens. And so.
I guess what my concern is that if we take ownership of them, now it becomes our responsibility, and we're letting these guys off the hook that are supposed to be dealing with it, right? And I'm just wondering how we can make sure that we're recovering money from these owners that should be. Any ideas on how we can do that? Because even us applying to the abandoned vessels, that's staff time that's being taken up and whatnot, and who knows if that's going to be around in 5 years from now. Down the road, so.
Yeah, you know, at this moment in time, this is what seems to be one of the only available methods for us to actually deal with the boats. We've approached the vessel owners. They have expressed no interest in taking financial responsibility for them. One said that the Coast Guard, in the future, there is some legislation coming down that there may be some monies and authorization provided to the Coast Guard and the Ministry of Fisheries. But we don't really know exactly what that's going to look like at this point in time, but they said the Coast Guard is going to take care of the boat. So at this point in time, this is our one mechanism that we can implement now to be able to take care of the 4 boats at hand.
Any other discussion? Go ahead, Allison.
I think this is great, and we just unfortunately have to go ahead. And the new legislation that the federal government has out might enable them to go after people, but you can only get what they've got in the way of assets to cover them. Most of these cases, you can't get water out of a stone. So the boats are probably, might have a teeny bit of salvage value, but probably not. And the place they take them to needs money to deal with them as well. It's all a cost, and by applying to the federal boats program, we will at least get some money for it. They're hazards to the kids in the summertime when they're sitting there where they are, in that beach.
Maureen first.
I'll be voting in support of the recommendation. But I did have 2 questions. When an owner or non-owner says, I own the boat or I don't own the boat, is there any kind of written confirmation of that, or does that all end up being verbal?
There is no written confirmation of that. It is verbal. Unfortunately, at this point in time, registration of boats, it's moving in the direction of becoming a requirement, but at the moment it isn't. And so these boats are sold from one person to another. There really is no way to be able to track that and to provide definitive ownership of the vessels. And that is partly the reason the new legislation is coming through, in order to really tie a person to a vessel, and so that when a boat is sold, they need to transfer that registration to the new owner, just like a vehicle, and through that process. And so if they don't do that and the vessel becomes a problem, there's an original owner that would then be responsible for that. So we motivate people that when they do sell a vessel, to transfer that ownership.
Is it within the authority of BYLAWS services to ask someone to confirm in writing whether they own or do not own the boat?
I'm not sure, actually.
I think we have every right to ask that.
Because if you've got something, if it's all being verbal and it sounds from the report as though it's all one day yes and the next day no, if you had something in writing, it might bolster your case.
And I believe that Sophie and Tyler and I had spoken about the need for that.
Yes, and if I can speak to that, I think, and Tyler can speak to this as well, that it's really hard to track these people down.
I understand that.
And I think that we would have serious trouble asking them or getting them to put anything in writing, because they are non-responsive to emails from what ones we do have on file, and texting and phone calls and still no response. I'm not hopeful, but totally happy to try and pursue that.
Yeah. I totally appreciate the challenges here. And then the second point related to a point in your report, Tyler. You said if an owner steps up and claims the boat, Transport Canada will not provide the municipality authorization to remove the vessel. If the new owner, the owner, does not deal with the boat remains with no further recourse. So I read that as no further recourse by the municipality. Does Transport Canada have further recourse?
I believe that in the present state, do you mean recourse in having funds available for it to then be removed, or enforcement?
For dealing with it in some way. Because it sounds as though if somebody says, no, it's my boat, the municipality can't do anything.
That's correct.
So if someone says, it's my boat, the municipality can't do anything, what more can Transport Canada do?
I don't know the answer to that, but I will certainly be able to find that and provide that to all of council in an email.
And if I may just interject, Councillor Morse has her hand up, and I would encourage you once again to connect with Councillor Morse. She has a depth of knowledge on the subject.
I think the issue.
That's all the butter I'm forgetting.
Oh, yeah. That's why we got yellow agendas. The issue is the bottom belongs to the province. The water belongs to the feds. And I think if it was a hazard to navigation or an oil spill, the Coast Guard, I think, can step in and deal with it and take it. But if it's not a hazard to navigation and there's no spills, then it's sitting on the bottom. And now it becomes the responsibility of the province because it's sitting on the bottom. So like we had the one on Sandy Beach, and we had the Referral cement hull over in Seymour Bay. And they finally, the province finally years ago with the Referral cement hull in the foot of Senator Road, took it away. But it was, I don't know quite how we managed to finally convince them to do it, but it was, I think it was the safety issue of the kids climbing in out of it and hurting themselves. But it sat there for a year before they did it.
Certainly not a good situation.
No.
Dealing with these boats, it's hard, and I think this is the only avenue we have.
So here's hoping in the 30-day notice period, they don't come forward and claim it.
That has happened before.
Yes, it
Yeah,
has.
yes, unfortunately it has.
Yeah, I just am in support of this motion. I know about the years of work that have gone into building Mannion Bay strategy for restoring the ecological and social, whatever it's called. Socio-ecological stability, something about Mannion Bay. And I know the work and I know all the challenges, and I'm prepared to move the motion.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead. Okay, that council directs staff to proceed with the steps to obtain a Section 20 letter from Transport Canada authorizing Bowen Island Municipality to take possession of a vessel for each of the 4 identified vessels in the Bylaw Services Supervisor's Report dated April 16, 2019, and that council directs staff to proceed with applying to the Abandoned Boats Program, requesting funding for the removal and/or disposal of the 4 identified vessels currently located in Mannion Bay.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, I'll ask the question. All in favor? Thank you, that is unanimous. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, reports of committees, account commissions, mayor and release of resolutions from the closed mayor's standing committee on community lands meetings. So there was 2 resolutions that came out of the April 4th meeting, and they are in front of you there. These were both these were presented to the proponents, the health center and Birch. And you've seen these recommendations before because they're the same ones that came through council. The second one, which was given to Birch, is being put on hold.
Mary, can I suggest maybe both, in light of the new information with the healthcare center, and
Yeah.
in light of that the Mayor Standing Committee have a meeting with Birch on Monday, that
Correct.
both recommendations be deferred until our next council meeting.
A and B?
A and B.
Yes.
So if we have a resolution recommending deferral.
I'd like to move to cover this,
Yeah.
the recommendations from the Mayor's Standing Committee on Community Lands.
Okay.
Second.
I just wonder if the medical center wanted to go ahead with anything at this point in time.
No, I'm happy to see.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Well, do we need to move on that?
Yeah.
Vote on the motion to defer? Do we have to vote?
Okay, let's do it. So the motion is to defer these two resolutions? Or this one resolution, I guess?
No,
Two
well,
parts.
there's two.
Oh,
Well,
no, there's
9.1A
essential.
and 9.1A and 9.1B.
Yeah, A and B. All right.
And I moved and
second.
David seconded.
Second, okay. I'll ask a question, all in favor? That's easy. Okay, Councilors Hawkins and Nelson. Right.
So, this, all about composting. We all know that this is part of our plan. The Environment and Climate Action Committee has been looking at this as well. And this started actually in the last term. There was a presentation by, when Louise brought forward an idea that we have increased volume of organics on the island, we can look at composting it on the island. And we also had a presentation at that time by a proponent who can do that work. Then one of our committee members went and visited a site in Calgary where they're actually using that technology. And so that's one of the options, but it has some problems. It's basically a dehydrator, as I understand it, and the compost that comes out is not the quality compost that you can use for gardening. You could perhaps use it for burning, so we have some other value. So that's one option. We also have a big report that was done on the earlier council, that got into all sorts of detail, had a recommendation of one technology. I've looked that over, and that's very interesting. The Green Mountain, I think it's called. But I've also had some experience with this issue, and I've also talked to a company, well, Sue Ellen and I did, called Evergreen, who's looking at assisting us, putting together a potential proposal. But my experience with this is it's extremely different. Composting at home, when you're just doing your garden clippings and so on, it's okay. But once you start bringing in food waste into it, it suddenly becomes extremely problematic. We've had big sophisticated operations closed down in the city, in Vancouver, well, in Richmond actually, because there was years and years of trouble about odor. One thing you can do with when you've got food waste in there, you can have a closed system where you have anaerobic composting, which means it's composting without oxygen. It produces methane. Methane is fabulous because it's basically natural gas. You can pump that into your natural gas system, but we don't have natural gas here. And if you've got a system developed that produces methane, it's an explosive gas. So you want to be careful. So we need to move forward on this, but it's extremely difficult, and we need further advice. So what we need to do is start working with staff to put together some ideas for an RFP to help, not for a proponent, someone who's going to say, I've got a black box that'll fix this, but rather we have to have a whole systems approach, because you need to look at what your feedstock is. Our feedstock is mixed in the summer. In the winter, it's going to be largely food waste, which will be extremely difficult to handle. Then you've got to look at what you produce. Do you produce energy? Do you produce compost that's usable, that we can sell on the island? How much will we be able to sell it for? Will we have to be trucking that off the island or landfill or whatever? There are all kinds of things that you can do, but you have to look at the full system. So this is sort of out of the ability of simply one of our volunteer groups to then look at and look options and look into more detail of what the work was already done. We need to actually get some professional help to look into this. So what we're looking for here, and what the committee was looking for, is to get staff to help us by coming up with some ideas around a request for proposals for looking at the whole system. And I'm happy to work with staff on that. And I've also talked to people at Metro Vancouver who could help us with this, who have experience. I also talked to the chair of the Capital Regional District's Environment Committee a little while ago, who are also looking into this problem and trying to figure it out. And there's some people there who have a whole lot of expertise. So there's a bunch of networks that we could follow up with. But this is not an easy process, and we need to start. So that's really what we're asking for here. Maureen, you can add, I wasn't at the last meeting, but been working on that.
And I actually wasn't at the May 6th meeting when
Right.
this recommendation was
Right.
put forward. And at this time, I actually don't support the recommendation. I'd like to move to defer. And it's not because I disagree with what's in the recommendation, but for two reasons. One is that we're waiting to hear from the province as to whether we actually are able to retain some funding that we were granted to work on composting.
This was in the last term, was that?
In the last term.
Oh, okay.
And it was a grant that was good until the 31st of March. And Raj, I believe, applied for an extension on that. And if we have confirmation that the province is providing that funding, it helps to enable supporting this recommendation. The second reason I'd like to defer this is that we are trying to schedule a May 13th committee of the whole to look at all of our strategic priorities rather than looking at them in isolation. And this is definitely one of them, but I could list 5 more strategic priorities that are going to require staff time and money. And I'd like us to look at the larger picture before doing this on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think.
Could I just add in as well? We actually don't have anybody on staff at Bonnie out here right now who has any expertise in on-island composting. So it would be something we have to contract out to get, because I look, Daniel and Roger both metaphorically crawling under the table right now. We're short of planners.
Right.
And Raj is tapped out. So I think maybe part of May 13th is looking at how we can harness outside resources to help us out.
Sure. And before then, I could actually follow up with some of the contacts that I have to get a little bit more information about what the process might look like. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, did you?
No, I'm looking at Rob.
Oh, Rob did.
So, Raj, not to put you on the spot on this one, but this has come up at the Finance Advisory Committee meeting as well, around increasing the escalating cost of garbage, but it's much more so the composting aspect and us potentially going out looking for contractors to service that. Is there any timeline on that? Because it would make sense. I'm just wanting to make sure that this process dovetails well with that instead of them being separate and we hand off a contract somewhere and then you guys haven't done your work yet, or how that works. Any comment on that?
Have to kind of think about the logistics of that, because I mean, the finance committee had recommended that we look at that. I mean, that needs to be looked at in conjunction with putting out an RFP for our solid waste and organic waste. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe May was used as a guiding date for that. Was it?
I would say the two are definitely intertwined.
But they are intertwined,
Without a
yeah.
doubt. And I think that's a really good point, Councillor Bowen. And I think that's what we need to look at the 13th is coming up with the game plan, because it does impact next year's solid waste contract.
It's extraordinarily important that we move forward on this if we can. Even it's going to be tough. We've been down this road, a few times already, and we haven't been able to get anything resolved. So I don't know where the solution is going to be, but we're going to have to.
Contacts as well.
Yeah, like the process, the fellow I was talking to, Sue Ellen and I had a conversation with, he sort of outlined a process that he'd worked with at New West, but it's not just sort of doing an RFP for a company that'll produce a bin. It's looking at the whole thing and how you figure it out, from beginning to end, so that then when you're putting our RFPs, you're putting out the right ones to get the right things.
Well, that's right, because it's not going to be.
It also relates to where it would be situated
Correct.
and could potentially be situated on community lands.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna reflect on some of the work that had been done in the previous term, of which there was plenty, and there was no solid conclusion that we came to, except that, looking at the examples of some other communities sort of like us, I think Kathy found some, Campbell River was it, or
Powell River.
Powell River. They just went way down the track, and then council said, nope, you know what, we're just gonna do education. So all I wanted to say was that's something we can start anytime, and as a phase one for people that are doing home composting and thinking about how could waste be handled differently, including what's best for handling organic waste as the summer comes. And people,
Perhaps a set of council staff work group to look at this too, because I mean,
That's a good
it
idea.
is,
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with Maureen and Sue Ellen in the past, and I think between the groups, we have a little bit of knowledge, but not a ton.
Oh, we looked at it in the finance committee
Yes,
and
correct.
stuff,
So
and those reports back
It's
a few years ago
yeah.
too.
it's a
so.
big project, I support deferring it and
Yeah.
looking
It's a
at it
simple
with all the
project.
other big projects. I think that's a good idea.
But I think it's got a fair bit of magnitude,
Yeah.
but part of
Yeah.
it's driven from the cost of
Exactly.
moving these organics off the island now.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot more impetus, and I think it's gonna be a lot larger than we think it's gonna be. So it's gonna take a considerable motivation to get this thing going.
Yeah.
I think it's very much.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I
can
would
somebody move to
to
defer?
defer.
Okay, thank you, and I'll second it.
I'm
And-
sorry, just a point of
Sure.
information. Oh, yeah, no, I was just questioning when, I'm just trying to get
I
some
was gonna say, move
resources.
to defer to the May
When were
13th
we, it's May
trial.
13th?
That's right,
May
yeah,
13th.
Okay.
If we put that in the actual recommendation, the
Yeah.
date to the May
Okay, good,
13th.
thanks.
For discussion. Okay, any further discussion on it? I'll ask a question, all in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous.
Can I just ask, you've got all the information from Peter Taggart and all those booklets and everything?
Yeah, got that last year's or a couple of years ago.
Thank
Did
you.
you want 6 inches or?
You try to clear out your place.
No, I have a copy too, and it's, I mean, a lot of work was done, and he found exactly the same frustrations, I think, so.
Okay, 9.3, Councilors Fass and Morris, members of the Emergency Program Executive Committee.
Yep.
There you go.
I will.
There you go.
Do you want to take this one, Allison?
No, we just want to make a motion, and has anybody got any questions? Makes sense? Okay. The only one I would like to correct point 3, and it should say public road allowance, because the road is more the paved surface, and the road allowance is the 5 to 10 feet on either side where all the stuff gathers.
Yeah,
Okay.
the road allowance, yeah.
It makes it clear too. Otherwise it looks like a department.
Got that?
I'll second them as amended.
So I guess I should read it then. I move that council request Bowen Island's Metro Vancouver Director to ensure that Bowen Island is included in the annual Metro Vancouver Regional Homeless Count. That council advocated UBCM for better cost sharing with BC ambulance service in terms of night landing service. And that council refer the question of tree debris removal for the purpose of wildfire prevention from public road allowances to Public Works Fire Department and Emergency Program Coordinator.
I'll second.
And I guess the first one was, we don't know what we have to plan for emergency shelters if we don't know how many we've got. And
Have we been in their account before?
yes,
Yeah.
we have been. So we just want to make sure we're in. And then.
So is that normally the case, or?
Well,
It's hit and miss with
sure.
Metro Vancouver. They
Okay.
included us the year before, and that was, they were doing more of a marine count.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons, that may be the first time we
I
were.
think
it was the
no,
first-
we've
first
been
and
in once
second.
before too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Check.
But we just want to be included.
The connection has often been through community services, so it was through Christine,
Yeah.
and then subsequently through Shauna to determine how that process would work. So
Yeah.
that would be where to start.
I have a question related to number 2. Does anybody know the deadline for advocating at UBCM? Because I know it's
Not
fairly
September,
early.
yeah, it's not that early.
When we get the requests
Yeah,
for
it's like-
minister meetings, then we would book a meeting with the appropriate ministry
June or
handler for
July.
these, the ambulance.
Oh, okay,
service.
I thought this might have meant, as long as people that are only looking for that and not, that would put out a formal resolution and go through all
Yeah, I
those
don't think
steps.
that
No,
was-
we weren't, I
Thank
don't
you.
think we were
Okay,
including,
That's fine.
yeah.
Good.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just a
Rob?
clarification, just because it's,
Yeah.
I've never heard of this ambulance service in terms of night landing services.
Night helicopter,
Yeah,
so we've got to provide the pad,
okay. So
pay
that's,
for it all.
okay, so that's, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
BC Ambulance, I think it was BC Ambulance, they stopped the night landings, and we didn't find out till about 6 months after the fact, this was
That's
from the
right.
next council thing. Our emergency plan coordinators work proactively with Helijet to get it reinstated, but it's gonna cost us between $10,000 and $15,000 to put that pad in.
I'll ask a question, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Okay, back to Councillor Fast.
Sure, these are recommendations from a couple of Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee meetings. The first one is relating to that council direct staff to approach First Nations regarding the possible interest in participating in renaming process of a pebble beach at Cape Roger Curtis. That's in our new parks plan. I thought you'd like to see an actual printed bound copy. Yay! And so that's from this whole process that took all kinds of community input into it. And in light of council's resolution at the last meeting, though, this might be something that, and in Bonnie's absence, this might be something that council wishes to bring up at our at the meeting that we will hold with the Squamish Nation when that invitation happens. And if so, we may want to just leave it like it is, and then it's just directing staff through Kathy or we may want to do it ourselves. Anybody have a preference?
Well, it's not quite as easy as it appears to do that. I think the process that we've started, with actually engaging the First Nations, and we'll go down that path because that seems to be the way that is most effective.
Then I'd like to just propose to remove the words direct staff to.
Okay?
And just say the council approach.
Yeah, the council approach First Nations regarding the possible interest in participating in a renaming process.
Yeah, do you want to leave it as First Nation or just specifically Squamish Nation?
We could say Squamish Nation, yeah. Okay, I move that.
Okay,
I'll second that.
Thank you.
further discussion? Ask a question, all in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. And then on the next page, there's a couple. The first one is just the work plan as amended. I don't know, I would just like to keep that together with the other ones, because why do that? In the number 2 there, I had some questions about why was Pebbly Beach, this is the one on Senator Road over here on Mangan Bay, Leaf Bay. That was because of the way the question came to us at Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee. It was, the staff were wondering, should they put the toilet, this permanent toilet down there at Pebbly Beach on Senator Way? That was their idea. And our idea was because it's a year-round amenity for people that want to walk on trails and use these 2 parks, Quarry Park and Headwaters Park, rather than a very seasonal, much larger facility down there in a very tight space on Pebbly Beach. This was the recommendation that staff came to. So if the council would like, I would just take the first whereas. So the line beside.
I have another thought to changing it because do we already have the toilet in stock?
We have part of a toilet in stock. Parts of it have been, we had one. Well, I think a door, part of it. Who cares? The point is, no, parts were used to repair existing toilets on Bowen. And so there's a few parts that need to be ordered.
Because otherwise we could say, be it resolved that the available permanent pit toilet be installed at Quarry Park.
Or the parks.
So just for clarity here, are you suggesting that they take the toilet out of Beverly Beach?
There isn't one there.
There isn't
Oh, I
one
thought
there.
they put one in.
No,
this
it
one.
was temporary. It was just for
Oh,
the
okay.
2 hot times of the season. We had some issues when it was first installed, and then Bonnie got down there, worked with everybody, got it all sorted out, so the neighbors and the people, beach users, were happy. And it fits into a little tight little corner down there. There's also a creek drainage, right? And there needs to be a place for the ambulance to get down there. All kinds of reasons to keep it very densified.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
a very tight
Like it.
spot. And it's also, that beach is mostly just used in the summer.
They're
So
gonna
this
be
is-
very upset if they don't get it this year, is that what you're saying?
I'm not making any recommendation. I think that the temporary toilet will be going back in. That's what's my
Oh,
understanding.
okay, good.
Yeah, I think it's.
So I don't know why the reference is, why how Beverly Beach even got in here if it's just going.
It was
Staff wanted the toilet
were
at Beverly
thinking that maybe that would be a good place to put this toilet. I think in the absence of Bonnie, staff are kind of going, well, where should we put it? Should we put it here? Happily, they came to the advisory committee, and we had a different idea. Now we've got our parks plan. Soon we'll have Bonnie back. Things will be clearer. You know?
So if we
Clear
did
as
my
mud.
suggestion and change the word in the therefore be it resolved, because there is a pit toilet available, or most of one. And because otherwise, we're asking for them to put something in the budget and we don't know what it is. So if we change it to therefore be it resolved that the available permanent pit toilet be installed in Quarry Park.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. I read the minutes after I sent the email, yeah.
Yeah. Available, the existing, the one that's sitting in the works yard,
Yeah.
however you want to put it. I mean, I'm happy changing the word "a" to "the," and I think
putting in available with the existing. Available.
existing,
What's the difference, what's the
uninstalled.
difference in cost here? Do we have any idea?
Well, we've got it sitting there.
they're expensive.
No, but they still install it.
They're
Install it.
pumped.
Yeah.
Hope, we get public works comments on this, just to, public works /
I think it's already in their work plan.
Okay.
They're just going, which location
Yeah.
are we going to install it
If
in?
you read the minutes, it said, where do you, they came and said they were gonna put it at Pebble Beach.
So I'm sorry, this is
What you're
confusing.
Yeah, I know.
And
What
I'm
you're
also-
saying is you've got an extra pit toilet just sitting there,
Yes.
and where should we put it?
It was a
Yeah.
pre-ordered pit toilet.
Oh, okay.
Intended to be installed this summer. The
Yeah.
question is where we put it. And the very last part of that the feasibility of expanding the parking lot at Quarry Park be explored, that's just to facilitate having enough space to put the pit toilet and still keep the existing amount or have a little bit more parking. Otherwise,
So moved as amended.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
let's move on.
Yeah.
Well, the
Yeah,
work, I'll second that.
My question has to do with number one in the work plan. There's nothing that I could see that referenced the work plan to the parks plan, in the work plan itself.
No, that's right. We didn't have copies of it until
So
a
is
meeting
there-
last week.
So is everything that's in the work plan in the same priority that it is in the parks plan? Or is there new stuff in there? Is it consistent with the parks plan?
The committee is an advisory committee, and it worked with Bonnie and helped create the parks plan, but we didn't write the parks plan. The work plan that we came up with, as every advisory committee has to do, was a collection of ideas, things that were already in process, things that staff were already working on, and it didn't specifically reference the parks plan because none of us had copies, and because we hadn't seen the numbers at the back, which are all of these implementation table, pages 67 has the dollar figures. And earlier this week, last week, I was asking around about where are these numbers? Do we have money in the budget? And we figured out that because Bonnie wasn't with us this year, that the parks plan, budgeting and implementing the parks plan is not something that's actually budgeted for. So this year,
And that's all correct. Sue Ellen and I together realized that we're bumping our heads against walls without Bonnie here when it comes to
But
implementation
that
of parks.
doesn't help mean? Because
Well, I think what Sue Ellen is saying, and because we're not implementing the parks plan this year, the committee has filled with other items that are pressing to the committee.
okay, but we adopted a parks plan, and we haven't got any budgets for, I don't even know if any of this stuff is budgeted for. And I can't approve a work plan that isn't consistent with the parks plan. And if there's things in this work plan that aren't even contemplated in the parks plan, then why are we contemplating?
I can speak to that. On page 67 of the brand new parks plan that now I have with these numbers in the back, it says, new public toilets, 4 over 10 years, medium timeline, planning costs.
I'm talking about point one, nothing else. The toilet issue is we've already bought the toilet, so it's more the work plan. Is the work plan consistent with the parks plan? And are there things in this work plan that aren't in the parks plan? And without having the answers to those questions, I can't support the work plan.
I wonder if we could sever these.
That's a good idea.
And then defer
Okay,
one
1 and
defer
2.
that.
Yeah. And looking at work plans in terms of their consistency to the area plans and the strategic plan could also be done at the May 13th meeting.
Yeah.
It would have to anyway, because that's part of our implementing the parks plan. We need to consider that, because it doesn't look like that can happen this year.
Raj, did you have a?
I just wanted to kind of clarify, you were referring to a table at the back.
Yeah.
And so the table at the back is with the costs in it. I mean, I can't remember it exactly, but it's a guiding
Yeah.
principle of what needs to be done. That doesn't guarantee that those items should be in the budget or will be in the budget.
Yeah.
You draw from those items and you put or staff will put those projects forward for council to approve in the year that we're budgeting for.
Yeah.
Because we went through that discussion with the transportation plan as well. So when staff is putting projects forward, they should align with the parks plan or with the transportation
And I think the
plan.
problem, Bonnie had provided a list, but it doesn't sound like it was adopted as part of this year's plan. And so I think effectively we're looking at that the parks plan is on hiatus until she's back in office.
Yeah.
So basically, we still haven't started implementing the parks plan.
Correct.
And we're still operating the way we always have.
Correct.
Whereas some of these things undoubtedly are in here, because I can find them, but they do not mesh like this because we haven't begun implementing it yet. In fact, the committee only just received it.
Because we didn't backfill the manager of Parks and Environment's position while she was away, it has caused a gap for a year's period of time.
However, we have that toilet.
Yeah, well, could I, in the spirit of being helpful here, would it be better if we just took item 2? This one,
Okay.
and deal with this independently? And if you need a second motion to defer or hold over number 1, because I think Councillor Fast just wants, frankly, let's get this moving and happening, and if we can deal with this, either in abeyance or hold number 1, let's deal with the second issue and get it moved on, and it'll probably save a lot of time and be extremely helpful to those people in need on Pebbly Beach.
Just on the parking, looking at expanding it and the feasibility of that, it seems very out of step with the pit toilet. I have no problem moving the pit toilet forward and getting the thing out there. My suggestion would be that we sever that last little piece, so it would be 1, 2, or sever that off, or if I can make an amendment to strike that until we have Bonnie back and we can look at this, unless that's part of the parks plan, which I'm assuming it wasn't originally.
Is this time sensitive other than the toilet? No. Or is anything time sensitive?
I think the parking is in relation to the toilet, what I heard from Councillor Fax, that room in the parking lot is needed for the toilet itself. Did I hear that right?
There's a very tight, small parking lot, but there's 2 big parks served by it. One of them is Headwaters Park, which is the long, level walking one, which helps people regain their health and people who have difficulty with steepness. And so 2 parks served with this one small parking lot. Sometimes people park out in at the side of the road there. What is that road? It's not Sunset anymore. It's a big Cow Point Drive. And which you know, is a bit of a traffic trouble, and there's a crosswalk, and the trouble is, if you put a pit toilet in there too, it takes up some of those parking spaces.
And there's no
Or
traffic.
makes it difficult for people to get all the way in because it's so tight, so that some parking spaces would be unused. There is room on the left-hand side as you drive in. From memory, 20 years ago, or whenever Quarry Park was established, I remember on the map and some discussion about that in terms of when the time comes, we can expand this parking lot. There's room up here, and so the reason this is here is so that we don't lose parking by installing the toilet in the most convenient place, which is right there.
I have maybe suggest that we, council's amenable to moving ahead with authorizing the toilet, and public works staff be report back with a plan for the parking for that area.
That's a great idea.
Yep, I would.
I think so, just separate. I go by there 20 times a day, because I'm on Party Yard, but I've never seen a car on the street. I've never seen a parking lot more than 50% full. So, but you know, that could be the times I'm traveling too.
Once
so.
there's a toilet there.
Oh, I know the difference.
They look
Big
for
attraction.
it to stop on the way, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Just never know.
Okay, so that second one would be that staff be directed to, or public works staff?
Yes, please.
Public works staff be directed to bring a plan. Have you already got this all figured out down there?
I don't know what's wrong with leaving it as the feasibility for public works staff.
I can,
That staff explore the feasibility of expanding the parking area at Quarry Park.
I report back to council.
And report back to council. Thank you very much. So, Hope, did you have something to say, or can I just read the motion? Or what have you got?
Just on that one.
Yeah.
Could we put in it to accommodate the installation of the pit toilet at the end of that? If that's
Sure.
what the purpose of it is?
Report back.
would you like me to read what I have?
Yes.
The public works staff be directed to report back to council regarding the feasibility of expanding the parking area at Quarry Park to accommodate the installation of the pit toilet.
Thank you. Well, I move that.
I was wiggling over here, but nobody was looking at me.
I was trying. I wasn't. I'm not.
You guys
Got a little secret button under the table.
Yeah, second.
I move that whereas limited parking at Quarry Park is inadequate for demand at certain times of the year and may create safety concerns if cars are parked on the roadways, we can leave off the whereas if you want.
leave off.
Okay. That a permanent pit toilet be installed, that council directs staff to install a permanent pit toilet at in Quarry Park to service both Quarry Park and Headwaters Park year-round, and that the feasibility of expanding the parking area at Quarry Park, or whatever you said,
Whatever.
and whatever Hope said.
Whatever Hope said.
I move those things.
And I second those things.
And we're deferring number one.
Does Gary get to do the ribbon cutting on that?
Probably.
We'll make sure he does.
Make more glorious jobs.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion on the toilets?
Do I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Yeah, I second it.
Thank you.
Okay, last question, all in favor?
All right.
Thank you, unanimous.
And
It is
I
intended for
would
this
move that
year.
we refer the 2019 work plan back to the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee to ensure it's
Consistency.
Consistency.
We can report.
consistency with the Parks plan.
We can report on its consistency, but can that be after our May 13th meeting?
Yeah, absolutely, why not?
Because then we'll have a better idea of what we're gonna do.
It's gonna be anyway.
Uh,
Time flies around.
So
Defer-
defer recommendation until after the strategic planning meeting on May 13th.
Thank you.
And-
Yes, I move that.
Okay, that's perfect. Second, Maureen, thank you, I'll ask the question, all in favor? Defer. Okay,
Okay, Islands Trust membership.
back to you.
I had a recommendation here, which I'm going to withdraw. And this is because the meeting that this was intended to inform the people having that meeting happened the day after our council meeting, 2 weeks ago. And so it's not needed. So I have, since then, seen Minister Selena Robinson and shook her hand and said I was from Bowen Island and the Islands Trust, and that was it. It's done. We still have our report coming in June, and
Okay, good.
So council's resolutions still stand, and we'll be getting that information.
Maureen.
I don't follow that logic at all. The purpose of the recommendation that you brought forward was not just to inform an upcoming meeting, it was to express the opinion of this council to Islands Trust, but also to our public. And I think there is still value in considering this recommendation.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to hear that, and I'll put it back on the table.
I got a couple of questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
Based upon the motion that we unanimously passed, so not to read it all out, but it did say, let it be resolved, council request Islands Trust to review the municipal tax rate position, etc., etc., etc. Do I gather, I don't think we've had an official reply back to this
No.
as yet? No, we haven't, but
As I've mentioned to Hope, I believe, so that she could leave room on the agenda, this is a matter that will be coming to council in early June. And because that's the time scale of the work that has to be done at the Islands Trust end. And that's when it's coming anyway. I know I've communicated that to you weeks ago. And so that work is all in hand and being done.
see, I appreciate you being prepared to withdraw the motion, because my feeling is I would like to see the motion deferred until we hear back from Islands Trust. You know, we received lots of opinions, and of course they vary, and as expected. But the amount of the requisition did catch a lot of people, maybe by surprise. And all I'm asking is, please, not necessarily opposed to the recommendation per se, but I would like to see it deferred till after we hear back in June from Islands Trust, because what I think it will do, I think it sends, I won't say a confusing message, but for people who wrote in one vein, they will see this as just a way of, I don't know, reducing the strength of their argument. I don't think it's productive at this stage, and I would ask that it be deferred till we hear back from Islands Trust, and then if we want to raise that motion, well, absolutely fine. So I would say, please, you know, I think it would be somewhat divisive to send it now, and I think a lot of people would take exception to it. I'm just asking that we put this motion unanimously on in front of Island Trust, and they're going to get back to us. And I ask that we hold, please, any further motions relating to the Island Trust till after we've heard back from the report.
I was just going to say, when I looked at the resolution that was included here, when I talked to Hope, I had meant a different resolution. We passed one on, I believe it was March 25th. That BIM staff also report back to council on process involved. I don't remember even what the resolution was. Yeah, and that was the one, sorry, when I was talking about that should go on the agenda here. So there is also an outstanding resolution.
Yes.
For BIM
Yeah,
staff.
there's two report back. Yes. Yeah.
Just wanted to offer that clarification.
And I guess my question was, have we formally sent resolution 19-140 to?
I did, the day after the meeting.
You sent it to the?
I sent it to their CA.
Okay, because I gather it was never formally put on the table for.
Yeah, no, I sent it maybe the same night, if not the same night, the next day.
That was within days of trust council. I think
Yeah.
the agenda was already set.
Yeah.
Were you able to find that book, or did you?
Yeah, I know what meeting, but when you're talking.
I think it was,
I wondered why this one was here.
Okay, so-
yeah, no, I was.
I'll just speak to this a little bit. I'm not sure that, well, I don't know whether it's even worth talking about this here, because it's not really, the Islands Trust Act is an act of the province. And the Islands Trust area is defined in that act. It runs from the international border all the way up to just south of Texada, and between Vancouver Island and the mainland includes Howe Sound and pass in it. And so I just, unless we're asking the province to amend the act, to change the boundaries of the Islands Trust area and, or something like that, that's partly why I had put this motion on the table the last time, was to provide some clarification. And in the realm of clarification, I'm not sure that the Islands Trust or Bowen Island Municipality could,
Anybody in this?
you know,
To trigger, could I read the resolution that I had actually wanted included? It was from March 25th. And it was that council directs staff to provide a report detailing Bowen Island municipality's rights and legal obligations with respect to the Islands Trust financial contribution.
yeah.
So that report is still forthcoming.
Because we would be asked not to pay the levy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which are under discussion at different levels of government at this point in time, I guess.
No, that meeting took place, as I
Oh, it did?
understand it, yeah, the day
What
after our,
does that mean?
a meeting between our MLA Jordan Sturdy
Yeah.
and Minister Robinson's staff,
Oh, okay.
I believe. That's what I hear from Islands Trust Executive Committee, who had originally flagged it. You can.
Yeah, I talked to their CAO who had indicated they'd been asked to provide a briefing paper because MLA Sturdy was meeting with, I think, Minister Robinson.
Yeah, so I didn't know the dates at our last meeting. Maybe others did, because we deferred it till now, when it's too late.
So it wasn't.
So we still haven't heard
between
anything
the trust
back
and
from them.
Minister Robinson, which I got the feeling when you said you met Minister Robinson and you shaking your hand.
No, sorry, that was at the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, and I can report on that, but I'll wait until it's on the right place on the agenda.
David?
Okay, so I'm,
Gotta wrap this up.
yeah, let's wrap this up. The Islands Trust issue, so I'm a supporter of us being in the Islands Trust. I didn't like, however, I also recognize that it was fair enough to raise the issue of a tax level. It was excessive, appeared to be excessive, so I'm glad it's being
Evaluate that
investigated.
after 20 years.
What concerned me was the whole array of letters that say, let's get out of the Islands Trust. So I don't want to inflame that, and maybe that's, we've had a bunch of letters and now it's quieted down for a while. I'd like to keep it quieted down, I guess. I'm not sure why we would have this motion that perhaps will just get people riled up again, and
That's why I was gonna withdraw it.
yeah,
No,
because I'm not sure what
I
it achieves.
appreciate that.
It is not up to Bowen Council right now to discuss the Islands Trust. As Sue Ellen says, this is part of the act. This is not something that's on the table in the slightest. So let's not make it look like it is.
And that's the purpose of the staff report coming forward. is
Yeah.
So the community understands
Yeah,
what's involved with the
That would be-
conduct of the trust.
so I'd rather just leave it for now. And I support Sue Ellen's pulling it off.
Well, she's with John and nobody's moved it, and nobody's seconded it.
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
Maureen moved it, and I seconded
Yeah.
it.
Oh, did you?
But what do you think, Maureen?
I don't, at this point in time, I don't think it serves a purpose.
Well, I think there have been a lot of conversations apparently been going on that our public isn't aware of, and that concerns me. If there was a meeting by the Islands Trust, it would have been helpful for the rest of us to know the outcome of that
It wasn't,
discussion.
the Islands Trust wasn't in the meeting.
Perhaps it's just requesting our MLA to report back, or requesting to provide some clarification.
Absolutely, yeah. If they've had that, if that has
If it's
transpired.
taken place, I for one don't know.
So I just thought it had.
Jordan Sturdy was at ABICC.
Oh, yeah,
It was sort of in the conversation.
okay. Well, either we leave it to staff to come back with the information that they can get. Like I said, we should try to pull the information out
Let's get
of MLA Sturdy.
I'd be prepared to support deferral of this,
Okay.
but
I'll move to defer.
I'll second that.
Second.
Further discussion? Thank you. All in favor? That is unanimous. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you. So I'll read out the recommendation and then get a second and then I'll discuss it a bit. So my recommendation moving forward is that whereas electrifying the Bowen ferry is identified as a high priority element 812 alternative ferries in Bowen Island municipalities adopt a transportation plan 2018 to 2038. And whereas C5 of Council Strategic Plan, Island Plan 2019, indicates implementation of the transportation plan, therefore be it resolved that Council write a letter to the Islands Trust Executive Committee requesting that it advocate on behalf of Bowen Island Municipality by considering the inclusion of working with BC Ferries to electrify the ferry fleet in its strategic plan.
I'll second that. Do we write to the executive committee or trust council, because it's trust council's strategic plan? If you wrote to the executive committee, they would bring it to trust council? I don't know if it matters.
I don't mind wordsmithing that at the end. So, a couple of reasons for bringing this forward at this time. First off, the Islands Trust right now is working on their strategic plan. I believe the first meeting was in March 12th, 13th. And then they have another meeting in June, and they're going to work on that to September. And this will be their strategic plan moving forward for the next 3 years, so for the entire term. We've seen quite a bit of action on Bowen, I know through the Transportation Advisory Committee in the past and also in the present right now, of interest in seeing electric ferries on Bowen Island. We've had the mayor was at the Kids Climate Change Summit recently, and also Island Trust recently put forward a climate change emergency along with a number of other communities. And on top of this, we have the rebuilding of the Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal, which is going to be, the planning of that's going to be starting probably within a year from now. Knowing all these things are tying together and having a 3-year plan, and also a concern that we may see the building of the Horseshoe Bay Ferry without the ability to have electrified ferries in the future. I would like to work, I think it would be helpful for us, along with the Islands Trust, to work on working with BC Ferries to see electrified ferries moving forward. There have been some concerns right now also about the potential for the new ferries for them to be starting to use LNG. And then down the road, looking at the electrified ferries, I think that concerns me a lot. I think there's been a clear message that I've been hearing that no, we want to see electrified ferries. We don't want to go to LNG ferries. Many of the islands, we all use BC Ferries. That's something that sort of unites us. So this is an area that I think we can work with all other islands on, and then as a body, us having a bit more oomph working with BC Ferries to make sure that this is a central push moving forward as they're buying new ferries, and also as we're redesigning Horseshoe Bay Terminal.
Up to you, sir. Go ahead.
Just that I had been imagining that I could bring a motion also to this table about the different ways that we could work together, the Islands Trust and BIM, because BIM is further, we, the municipality, are further ahead in our strategic planning than a group, than Trust Council, which meets 4 times a year. So some of the things I can imagine that we might work together on, that I hope to have on this agenda but didn't make the deadline, were things like logging, derelict vessels, First Nations relations, gaining rural status for grants. All these things are in our island plan, and there are other things that we could be working with the Islands Trust on. So I'm happy to second this motion and get the ball rolling with one item going forward. And then later we can ask for other things, because if the group remembers, when Islands Trust was here on May the 4th, they, March, thank you, they provided a slideshow, Claire Frater in particular, Federation-wide services that Bowen could be involved in. And here are some of the things that Bowen Island Municipality could ask for from the Trust: advocacy workshops, communications, First Nations relations, policy amendments, mapping, things like that. So I'll have more things to bring, but I think this is one of the main ways that we could perhaps work together. So I'll be voting in favor of this motion that I have seconded.
Step one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Listen, I'll get it to the, we're on site here. Has anyone actually sat down with BC Ferries and said, look, it's obviously pretty desirous that we do this. Do they themselves have a policy, or do they themselves have a vision in terms of electrifying their fleet already?
You're chomping at the.
I know David go
Yeah,
first.
okay, so Sue Ellen and I are going to say the same thing. So Sue Ellen told me this, but I also heard it from someone else in Vancouver Island, that the CEO, Mark Collins, who we have a good relationship with, he made a great speech to Vancouver Island communities just a short while ago, saying BC Ferries is looking into this. So it's also on the agenda of our meeting with the Ferry Advisory Committee in another month, roughly. We just put it on the agenda for them. And as Rob says, it's really important that we look into the Horseshoe Bay redevelopment. Is making sure that the electricity supply is a critical part of it. So I think the stars are sort of aligning from several directions. I think we've got some opportunities here.
My question was, it'd be so much more powerful if not only were we asking them, but they were telling us that this is what they were looking at. So between the two, so they meshed pretty perfectly, remembering the billions of dollars involved in renewal of a whole fleet, the size of BC Ferries. This is not going to happen, obviously, as everyone knows, overnight.
No, it certainly isn't. So,
I'll just report quickly on this. Mark Collins of BC Ferries, the CEO, was the keynote speaker at the Associated Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities annual convention that I went to last weekend. And Peter Luckham of the Islands Trust asked him about information. Can you help us with parking and ferry lineups? And he gave an answer. They're working on the terminals, and also how can we work with buses and connectivity and that kind of thing. So I thought that was helpful too. They're getting more walk-ons throughout the system. And another question following, Peter asked a couple of questions, but anyway, from the Islands Trust. Also, a question was, how long until they're all electric, these ferries, and the concerns about fracking and LNG. And Mark Collins' answer was, absolutely on our radar. We're trying to get bigger batteries that are big enough. We're not quite there yet, slightly behind the bleeding edge is where they like to be because they don't want to take all that risk. 10 years is what his answer was. However, I shook his hand too as he left the stage and said, hello, I'm from Bowen Island, and I think Bowen Island and our new transportation plan and our community might be interested in helping you with some of that risk, and we make changes and stuff like that. So positive.
yeah, I don't see this happening overnight, and I also don't see that. I mean, we're dealing with Metro and Trans, like they should all be pushing the same buttons as far as BC Ferries are concerned. But I think BC Ferries is, it's definitely in their game plan, and we're not telling them anything here. Having the trust fund on the door, I don't know how effective it's going to be, but I don't mind going along with the resolution. I just don't think it's going to be bear that much fruit.
The small ferries that are being built now are being built with dual fuel.
Yes,
so
sir.
They could be run 100% on electricity when the shoreside hydro connections are there so they can charge them.
Yeah, certainly that's not going to be an oversight at Horseshoe Bay.
No, and Horseshoe Bay, from having participated in a couple of the consultations, having the ability, they've got to increase the capacity down there. So you might want to advocate with BC Hydro to facilitate better hydro services at the BC Ferries terminals.
Okay, somebody want to read the resolution?
You did.
I read it, yeah, I was seconded.
So my only question was whether we write to the Islands Trust Council requesting that it advocate, since it's the Islands Trust Council's strategic plan.
Sure.
I'm happy to change
Sure.
that.
Let's come to us anyway.
Come to the same people.
Perhaps it would be Sharon.
Well, you'd address the letter to the Trust Council attention, Chair Lovell, but it is Islands Trust Council's strategic plan, they voted.
Well, it's not bad to have it in there for sure. Okay, any further discussion? Ask a question, all in favor? Okay, thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you, Sue. Or, sorry, Rob. Thank you, Rob. Metro, Vancouver Director, David Hawking.
Oh, thanks, Gary. So last Friday I was at the meeting of the Climate Action Committee.
Yeah.
A number of interesting things. So every half dozen years or so, they have a new strategy, or a clean air strategy, basically. And so they're just working on one now, and interestingly, some of the work in the last one was on reducing diesel particulate, because diesel is carcinogenic. And it's down by 2/3 in the region, diesel particulate matter. And basically the approach was heavy-duty non-road vehicles, like, you know, digging equipment and so on.
Yeah.
And so they're working their way up, getting those to be cleaner and cleaner. So anyway, there'll be consultation on that this summer, and then a new plan in the fall. Wildfire smoke, looking at the data of wildfire smoke, goodness gracious, the last couple of years where I've seen some aerial photographs or some satellite photographs going all the way across the country. This is starting at Victoria. Victoria kind of escaped, and it goes all the way across the country. Anyway, they're putting more work into communicating about that. They had and helping people understand the health effects, because probably we're going to have more wildfires, and we've had the last 2 years really bad. And so more effort into helping people understand what it means for you and what you should do about it. Really interesting one on. So in our report, somewhere in our report, we haven't dealt with it. I guess it was in the consent. We're spending, what, $800,000 on a bunch of culverts that have blown out because of heavy rain? Okay, so climate change report, impacts of heavy rain. So the changes in severe storms, so that's kind of in the Metro Vancouver region, the 1 in 10 year storm will become a 1 in, or heavy rain will become a 1 in 3 years, the 1 in 5 will become a 1 in 2, the 1 in 100 event will become a 1 in 10. So spending $800,000 this year for something, we can be expecting to be spending that on culverts and so on in the future as well. Just like we had the windstorm that damaged our wharf, and that made us think, oh my goodness, we're going to have to be prepared to handle that. This is another thing.
Yeah, it's not going away.
The other thing, and I mentioned this in an email, there was a really interesting presentation from a bunch of young women called the Sustainability Teens. And they actually gave a really, I mean, these are all grade 10 girls. They gave a great presentation. What they're arguing is for us to be moving, for Metro Vancouver in their development, their plan to be moving their targets from the 2 degrees that was in the Paris Agreement to the 1.5 that's in the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report on what we need to do to avoid severe damage. And so several other, I think, well, it doesn't matter, several other cities are asking them to come and speak to them, and I'd like to have them come and speak to Bowen. Maureen said we've got other things on our agenda, but I would certainly like to have them come, I'd like to invite them to come. And I will ask them if they have any connections to Bowen. They may well, I don't know. There may be some sustainability teams on Bowen who are already part of the gang. I don't know that, so I'll find that out before I have somebody come here. So.
Are we a big enough game in town for them?
They're
playing some pretty large.
They're playing with pretty large groups this year, but you know, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, David. Sue Ellen and Michael.
I can keep mine quite short, because what I've been doing over the last few weeks is actually doing, as a newer trustee, is actually just doing some research, learning more about the workings of the trust, the nature of the trust, the development of the trust, how it's grown since we became a municipality. And I'm sure it will probably raise some questions for our meeting in June, for our June meeting. So it's been some research. It's been some research for me, but nothing that at this stage I can divulge, because it's part of my learning about the trust and how the trust has changed and developed since we became a municipality.
All right, thank you. So.
I went to this Association of Vancouver Coastal Communities, I mentioned a couple times. I went as a executive member of the Islands Trust, but it's pretty good for Bowen too, and I recommend it to anybody who's interested in ferry issues and island issues. The Islands Trust had a couple of resolutions that were supported by the votes of the convention, so they'll be going to UBCM. BC Hydro gave a presentation. I thought it said basically what David has just said in terms of the storms that take down power lines and power outages, very similar. The first, 75 years, they had this many storms, and they've had that many in the past 10, something like that. And so anyway, the power outages are going to be more frequent, is what they're imagining. And Premier Horgan and Minister Selena Robinson, our Municipal Affairs Minister, was there as well. It was a very good meeting, and I just draw your attention to item 12.5A in the agenda, which is a information item, just a report on the Islands Trust Conservancy and what it's busy with. And I'll have more information for you all presenting on Friday at the House on Forum for those of you who can come as part of the board of the Islands Trust Conservancy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report.
Do you know, it's just because you want to stay on time, isn't it?
Yeah. You picked up our time.
I found another plum tree.
That was.
I should tell you, yes. Send it forward.
No, I don't have anything to report because the meeting is happening at the end of the week. And I will get more information on the public engagement strategy for the regional transportation strategy, which will include meetings with the local elected officials.
Okay.
But I don't know whether they're region-wide or area-wide or specific municipality-wide.
All right, so items removed from the consent agenda. We had 2 items. 3.4 was the first one. I think, Maureen, was that yours?
Yeah, it
Thank you.
was. So this is the recommendation that relates to them taking on some responsibilities for the Bowen Youth at Risk program. And I got quite confused by what was going on here. I mean, sort of in principle, I understand what's happening, but BIM is not mentioned anywhere except as a passing reference, those employed by BIM in the terms of reference. And there are a number of terms that are used in here that aren't defined with any degree of clarity. So I don't know what flow-through funding means. And I think that that would be important to have defined in the terms of reference, given that I think it's BIM that's doing the flow-through. The terms of reference are quite clear in that it's the caring circle that's responsible for the disbursement of funds. The recommendation says that the municipality enters into the agreement for the receipt of the grant funds from the foundation and the disbursement of funds to grant recipients. So procedurally, there is confusion between the recommendation and the terms of reference, and I'm not prepared to support it at this time, although in principle I think it's terrific. It just needs to be clarified around what the procedure is and what BIM is actually doing in this in this scenario. Maybe others understood it better.
I would ask Raj to speak to it. Raj and I met with Neil Boyd and Joanne Gassman last Monday to discuss it. And just time-wise, they're looking to announce this at their AGM on Friday. But effectively, Raj, maybe I'll just pass it over to you to describe what the process is.
Essentially, I mean, seemed clear to me, but they would be providing funding they would be providing us the funding because they need a charitable partner. They have to contribute to a registered charity. And then we in turn would provide that funding to
Caring Circle.
Okay.
And for them to administer their programs for youth at risk. So as long as they provide funding to us, we would turn that funding over to Caring Circle. If that funding were to subside, coming into us, then we would not be providing funding to Caring Circle. So our obligation would be dependent on receiving funding from them.
And I think what's key to this is they're really only looking for help for a 1 year period, from what I understood from the last conversation. So it would be a trial period of 1 year.
Trial period, yeah.
Okay, then the recommendation needs to be revised because that's not what it says.
Okay, well, I will defer to both Hope and Raj as they drafted this recommendation.
Yeah, the very last two words, to grant receipts.
It should be
doesn't make sense.
recipients.
It should be.
Yeah, but I think it should be, it's, the funds are going to the Caring Circle.
That's the change that needs to be
Yeah.
made in the recommendation. So the end of it has to read disbursement of funds to the Caring Circle for
The programs.
just further disbursement
For
to the
disbursement.
grant recipients.
For the grant
But it's just, it truly, it's not clear, is the bottom line. It sounds as though the municipality is going to be issuing the funds.
So you just want to put funds through the Caring Circle to grant recipients?
No.
To the
To
Caring
the
Circle.
Caring Circle
For
for
disbursement
disbursement to the
grant
grant recipients.
Or for conducting the educational and counseling program.
Just keep it simple.
No, it's who's giving the money to whom?
Yeah.
They're giving the money to
Municipality's
the
going to give the money
municipality.
to Caring Circle. Caring
Exactly.
Circle is going to use some of the money to conduct an education program and use some of the money to pay the counseling bills.
How about to implement the program?
So that's what I'm
Implement
saying,
the
is to implement the program, period.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
And let me just confirm that the beginning is okay. Just disperse rather than disperse in the third line with a B. To the Caring Circle to implement the program. Okay, that takes care of the recommendation, I think.
Can I just suggest, instead of municipalities auditor, it's Y apostrophe S?
Sorry, what was
Oh, in the terms of
that?
reference.
Municipalities auditor.
There is a recommendation that Hope provided on the table. I'm
That's
not
what,
sure if you-
I think that's what Maureen's working on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this, no, we don't have that.
So if this is just for one year, I'm okay with the terms of reference. If it carries on beyond that, I think this needs to be cleaned up with some definitions.
Yeah.
But the recommendation is what we're dealing with. We're not accepting terms of reference. So I'd like to move the recommendation as amended.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Right.
Wonderful. Unanimous, Allison?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we're good to go on to.
317, page
317.
109.
That's it. And whose was that? Sorry,
Me.
yours, yeah?
I was pulling that one, oops, sorry, I can't get this, okay. Yeah, this was the recommendation from the steering committee, the Firehouse Steering Committee, to allow an additional member of the public. And so I wondered, I looked at the minutes and I wondered about the need for this. What it said in the minutes was that the fire chief wanted to be on the, soon-to-be former fire chief wanted to be on the committee.
Well, I
And,
thought the minutes reflected that the committee had asked if the former fire chief
No, I
wanted
maybe
to.
reflected properly, that was my suggestion. I didn't want to lose his level of expertise, and so I suggested to the Fire Hall Committee that they expand the membership to include him as a future member of the board.
Great, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't because, that it wasn't as I had read it, which was that the former fire chief wanted to join the committee.
No, not at
Okay,
all, not at
that's
all.
great, thank you very much for that. Then I'm happy to move that the council amend the Fire Hall Facilities Steering Committee terms of reference to allow an additional member of the public.
Second. Further discussion, Maureen?
We're doing this to enable Ian to participate?
Correct.
Why shouldn't it say that? This says an additional member of the public. We're
Oh,
not.
because what our terms of reference right now says is up to three members of the public, so we're just changing it to say 4 members of the public.
Couldn't it say and the former
Okay,
fire
well,
chief?
and we appoint the former fire chief as the additional member, we could add that.
Yeah, I would, with what Allison's saying, yeah. Yeah, I think the terms of reference have to be kept fairly generic, but we could be clear that once a fire chief becomes a former member, former fire chief.
Yeah, it's
he
public-
is-
It's quite clear in the minutes that the reason for doing this is to
I think
allow us to appoint.
it boils down to the same thing. I think everybody knows what the intention is, and I'm happy to second it.
My
based upon
concern
that.
about getting too prescriptive in the terms of references, he could be a
Yes.
former.
We've
fire
got
chief.
several of those.
Yes.
Yeah. We did the same thing when Brian retired.
Oh.
Okay.
Right.
Vote on that?
It's been moved, and
Second.
Michael seconded it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. All right, we'll move on to, we're not closed, pretty much down the end of the road, be down to question period. Anybody have any
Ronnie's asleep.
thoughts out there? Yeah?
Well enough alone.
Okay,
We've
well,
even lost the press gathering.
on that happy note, we'll bring this, move to close the meeting.
Goodbye, you guys.
Well,
Rob, thank you.
Tim's being invited back for the closed meeting, but